Welcome to the Katie Dorset Council Chamber. Residents may sign up to speak by 6 p.m. the day of a council member meeting by using the Q-Minder kiosk just outside the chamber door. Please see the courier for assistance. To comply with requirements by the state in regards to Zoom meetings or hybrid meetings and to provide an optimum experience for the public, council will verbalize motions and votes will be conducted by roll call vote and electronically. Each member of council must vote unless there is a direct conflict. Zoning matters do allow for a 15-minute presentation both for and against the rezoning. There is a 5-minute rebuttal period for each side. Following the introduction of each case, if applicable, staff will make a presentation before the opening of the floor for questions from council members. The mayor will call on speakers in the order in which they registered, and at that time, their lines and accounts will be unmuted. All speakers should identify themselves with their name for the record. All participants must remain muted when others have been identified to speak. The meeting host will mute anyone who speaks out of turn. Once the item has been completed, the meeting host will remove speakers for said item from the Zoom call. Council will make a motion and a second to close the public hearing. The floor will be open for council deliberation and discussions, motions, and seconds. To move an item, and they should be clearly identified by raising their hand, being recognized by the mayor, and voted on by roll call. The mayor will announce the vote results. The city of Greensboro is committed to promoting an environment that is free of discrimination, bias, and bullying. Thus, harassment, words, jokes, actions, or comments based on an individual's sex, sexual orientation, race, ethnic background, age, religion, physical condition, or other legally protected characteristic will not be tolerated. In order to be considered, written comments must be submitted online through the city's website at www.greensboro-nc.gov. We do have a consent agenda for items G1 through G29, which are a grouping of agenda items that are voted on with one single vote to expedite what are believed to be routine and non-controversial items. Any council member may withdraw an item from the consent agenda due to a conflict of interest or for the purpose of voting no. Items removed from the consent agenda for discussion will be placed on the May 17th City Council business agenda. This meeting does include closed captioning. Depending on the length of tonight's meeting, we may take a short recess around 7:30. This is the time and place for our consent agenda. I do want to say that after a previous consent agenda, we were looking at the statute, and actually we are not allowed to have items on the consent agenda where somebody will recuse themselves for a financial interest. So in the future, council needs to make sure that they respond to the city clerk in a timely manner so that the consent agenda can be written the way that it is supposed to be written. So do we have, I do want to ask for a motion to pull G8, 11, and 12 from the consent agenda and postpone it to May 3rd.
So move.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem, seconded by Dr. Wells. All in favor, say aye. Aye. And that passes unanimously. I do want to take the prerogative of the chair. Council member Holston will be recused from item G3 since he serves on a local board. According to the new legislation, members recusing themselves due to their board service, that does not need to be a council vote. They just need to announce that they are recusing themselves from the vote. You said it's a different item number?
Yes, G23.
G23.
And I do request, Madam Mayor, to be recused because I do sit on that board.
So why don't we go ahead and do that one right now? Item G23 is a resolution to authorize a change order for fiscal year 2021 ERO1 contract in the amount of $41,500 with the Greensboro Housing Coalition. Do I have a motion?
Move the item.
Moved by Dr. Wells, seconded by Mrs. Hightower. Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson?
Yes.
I am a yes. Mrs. Abuzawader?
Yes.
Mr. Outling?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm,
Yes.
Mrs. Hightower,
Yes.
and that passes 8-1. I'm sorry, 8-0.
Consent agenda.
So we have a motion to move the consent agenda minus item number 23. Moved by Dr. Wells
Second.
and seconded by Mrs. Thurm. Mrs. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Holston,
Yes.
Dr. Wells.
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson.
Yes.
I am a yes. Mrs. Abuzawader. Mr. Outling,
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm,
Yes.
and Mrs. Hightower.
Yes.
And that passes 9-0. Thank you. We now move on to the public hearing portion of our agenda. Let's see, item number H1 is a public hearing for a resolution authorizing an economic development appropriation in the amount of 40,000 for the Greensboro Sports Foundation in support of the 2022 AAU Junior Olympic Games.
Move the item.
Wait, Mrs. Abuzawader?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I need to recuse myself from this as I serve on the Sports Foundation. And this is according to the new bill that was passed in December by the legislature.
Thank you. So I'm sorry, who is moving?
Move the item.
Moved by Mrs. Johnson, seconded by Mr. Holston. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Holston,
Yes.
Dr. Wells,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes.
I am a yes. Mr. Outling,
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm,
Yes.
and Mrs. Hightower.
Yes.
And that passes 8-0. Okay. Item number H2, 3, and 4, we will take together. Item number H2 is a public hearing for an ordinance annexing territory into the corporate limits for property located at a portion of 138 Fleming Field Road, 9.4 acres, Jim Allen, Inc. Item H.3, a public hearing for an ordinance for original zoning for a portion of 138 Fleming Field Road, Urban Design Partners for Jim Allen, Inc. And item number H4, a public hearing for an ordinance for original zoning for portions of Fleming Field Road right-of-way, City of Greensboro.
Move item 2.
Well, we need to have a presentation first.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, this annexation and original zoning request for approximately 8.5 acres in the site itself and 0.9 acres for the street right-of-way for Fleming Field Road. The property that is located on the adjacent to this site is located within the city limits and is zoned residential. The site itself, they're requesting the original zoning of conditional district residential multifamily 12. The property, abutting property is mostly undeveloped except for the property that is located to the west, which is located within the city of Greensboro and is developed with residential uses. This land is designated as residential on the future land use map in our comprehensive plan and urban general on the built form map. There are 2 conditions for this zoning case, this original zoning case. Condition number 2 needs to be added by the applicant. As a procedural matter, I'll need to read this condition into the record and council will need to take a vote to accept it. It
And
is-
we do have these changes in our folder if you want to refer to that as well.
Right. It is condition number 2, and it states that the maximum height of buildings shall be 40 feet. So I need council to accept that condition.
Motion to accept?
Move to accept.
Moved by Mrs. Thurm, seconded by Mrs. Johnson. Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mayor Pro
Yes.
Tem? I'm a yes. Mrs. Boothwait?
Yes.
Mr. Outling?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm?
Yes.
Mrs. Hightower?
Yes.
That passes 9-0. Thank
Great,
you.
Thank you. The staff recommends approval of this original zoning request because it's consistent with the designations on the future land use map and the future built form map. Staff also recommended approval because the zoning request supports the comprehensive plan's creating great places goal, and it also supports the building community connections goal. And this proposed rezoning will allow moderate intensity residential uses that are compatible with the various residential uses located in the vicinity. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the request at their March meeting. That concludes the presentation, staff presentation. I would like now to open it up to the public hearing so you can take public comments.
Thank you. We do have 3 speakers signed up on this item. Michael Duncanson, Paul Pennell are signed up in favor of. We do have Joe Pichowski. I need to know if you are for or against.
Madam Mayor, he has not logged into Zoom.
Okay, so we have 2 speakers in favor of this item. Mr. Duncanson? Mr. Pennell?
Yes, I'm here.
You have, the 2 speakers have a total of 15 minutes. If you would like to give us your name for the record.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. My name is Paul Pennell with Urban Design Partners, representing the petitioner here tonight. I believe also we may have a presentation that staff may be able to put up on the screen tonight as I lead you through a quick presentation. Yes, thank you so much. I'll be quick tonight. Thank you so much for city staff and the thorough presentation presented to City Council and Madam Mayor tonight. This is a photo of the Flemingfield Road rezoning petition Z2203-003, in which we're requesting an existing zoning of AG today, requesting a zoning district of RM12. If you could go to the next slide, please. Multiple design considerations were taken into account here as we move forward with this process. Just to name a few, the existing site conditions, of course, the Greensboro zoning ordinance, the comprehensive plan, and the proximity to the East Market Street corridor. Next slide. Just to provide a little bit of context to the location, we are located this 8.7 acres on the east side of Flemingfield Road, directly adjacent existing Talon Drive. Next slide, please. And also providing some additional context of the surrounding zoning districts as well. As mentioned, this is AG and we're requesting an RM12 district here. Next slide. Also wanted to provide some context to the proximity of the comprehensive plan and the Market Street corridor to the south. Next slide. And this is a representation of the current site plan that we're proposing here. While we may be requesting a limit of 69 units on site, the current working site plan includes 60 townhomes and a max height of 40 feet. We have incorporated a series of 2-way streets on site. Each townhome would include its own residential driveway and garage. Also, as you can see, we have stormwater control on site and tree save. In addition, we'll be working with NCDOT along Flemingfield Road for any potential road improvements that may be required during the development process if we were to be awarded this rezoning petition. And also, I'd like to bring up as well that we had a public engagement meeting on April 11th with the adjacent neighborhood where residents showed up, asked questions, and we had a thorough conversation about what's being proposed here. That presentation was recorded and we actually posted it publicly along with the presentation that we shared with the public for public consumption. And it's been posted for the past week or so for anyone to visit and take a look at the presentation that may not have been able to attend. With that actually concludes my presentation. I'm happy to remain here for any potential questions, and I yield the remainder of my time for anyone else that would like to speak in favor of the petition. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Pennell? Mr. Duncanson, are you on the line?
I am on the line. I don't really have anything to add to what's already been said. I don't know very much about the development itself. I am a landowner. I own some property that's adjacent to the property that's being discussed. I'm just trying to find out more about the situation. And that's basically all I have.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a motion?
Move item H1.
No, I need to close the public hearing first.
That's all you want to do?
That's all I want to do. Close by Mayor Pro Tem, seconded by Mrs. Hoffman. All in favor, say aye. Aye, opposed? That passes unanimously.
Move item H2.
So item number
Just the
H2 is a roll call vote. So that is moved by Mrs. Johnson and seconded by Mrs. Hoffman. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
I am a yes. Mrs. Abusawader?
Yes.
Mr. Outling?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm?
Yes.
Mrs. Hightower?
Yes.
And that passes 9-0. Item number H2 requires statement of consistency.
Move the item.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Wells, seconded by Mr. Holston. Dr. Wells, would you read it into the record?
The Greensboro City Council believes that its action to approve the zoning request for the property described as a portion of 138 Flemingfield Road from County AG Agricultural to City CDRM 12 Residential Single Family 12 to be consistent with the adopted GSO 2040 comprehensive plan and considers the action taken to be reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan's future bill form map and future land use map. The proposed city CDRM 12 zoning district as conditioned permits use which fit the context of surrounding area and limits the negative impacts on the adjacent properties. The request is reasonable due to the size, physical conditions, and other attributes of the area. It will benefit the property owner and surrounding community, and approval is in the public interest.
So that has been moved and seconded. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Mrs. Abusawader? Mr. Outling?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm?
Yes.
Mrs. Hightower?
Yes.
That passes 9-0. Now we need a motion and a statement of consistency for H4.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Holston,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Abusawader. Mr. Holston?
Yes, the Greensboro City Council believes that its action to approve the zoning request for the property described as a portion of Flemingfield Road right-of-way from County AG Agricultural to City RM 12 Residential Single Family 12 to be consistent with the adopted GSO 2040 comprehensive plan and considers the action taken to be reasonable and the public interest for the following reasons. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan's future built form map and the future land use map. The proposed city RM 12 zoning district permits uses that are compatible to uses on adjacent properties, and the request is reasonable due to the size, physical conditions, and other attributes of the area. It will benefit the property owner and surrounding community, and the approval is in the public interest.
Okay, so that has been moved and seconded. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mayor Pro
Yes.
Tem? I am a yes. Ms. Abusawader? Mr. Outling?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hightower?
Yes.
And that passes 9-0. Our next items are H5 and H6. So I just need to do a little bit of housekeeping. We have a number of people who are signed up to speak, who are here, but I need to know if you are in favor or against. Vivian Byrd. Favor or against? Against? Karen Watts, Yuda, I'm sorry. Against. So you're both against the rezoning. Felicia Angus,
Against.
Kenneth Norris. Mr. Norris? Okay. Jeremy Medlin. Richard McNamara. Lee Bryant. Okay. And then let's see, is Jeffrey Moore on the Zoom?
Hello, this is Jeffrey.
Okay, and you are for.
Yes,
Is
sir.
Robert Bingham on the Zoom?
Yes, I'm against.
Rosa Alejandro. Alejandro
Against.
Rosa, I'm sorry.
Against.
Against, and Kimberly Boston. Are you on the Zoom?
Yes, hello, I'm against.
Okay, so those are all the speakers except for the attorneys that I have registered to speak. Have we missed anyone? Okay, Mr. Galante, thank you.
Let's see.
The annexation and original rezoning request is, the site is currently zoned county agricultural and will be going to a city.
You know, I'm sorry, I haven't read it into the record
Okay.
yet. I apologize. Item number H5 is a public hearing for an ordinance annexing territory into the corporate limits for property located at a portion of 6462, 6468, and 6468 ZZ US 29 North, 111.74 acres, William Rudd Jr. Revocable Trust, and Herbert William Kennedy Enterprises LLC. And item number H6, public hearing for an ordinance for original zoning for a portion of 6462 and all of 6468 and 6468 ZZ US Highway 29 North, Amanda Hodian for the William G. Rudd Revocable Trust and Robert William Kennedy Enterprises LLC. Mr. Galante, please.
Great, thank you. And as I was saying, the majority of the abutting property is in the county's jurisdiction and zoned agricultural, except for the portion of property that is to the southeast of this site, which is in the city's jurisdiction and is zoned city plan unit development. The abutting property is mostly undeveloped, as is this site itself, again, except for the property located to the southeast, which is in the city's jurisdiction and is developed with residential dwelling units. This area is designated as residential on our future land use map and ex-urban on the built form map. This zoning case, original zoning case, has several conditions, and they were accepted at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, and I put them on the screen for your information, and they're also included in your packets. City staff recommended approval of this original zoning request because it was consistent with the built form map and with the future land use map. Staff also recommended approval because it supports the comprehensive plan's creating great places goal and the building community connections goal. Staff also recommended approval because the proposed conditional district residential 5 would allow low density residential uses that are generally compatible with the various residential uses located nearby. The Planning and Zoning Commission also recommended approval at their March meeting. That concludes the presentation. I'd like to now open it up to the public hearing.
Okay. We will start with those in favor of the item. Each side will be given 15 minutes to speak, notwithstanding the number of speakers signed up. Ms. Hodier?
Yeah, which one is her? She's 4. This one.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Amanda Hodiern. I'm here tonight on behalf of the property owner applicants as well as the contract purchaser and would-be developer if this should be approved. My offices are at 804 Green Valley Road, Suite 200 here in Greensboro. And if I may just take a quick minute and introduce who I have with me tonight. My client is Greenhawk Development Corporation. That's, I hope, a familiar name to you here in Greensboro in our housing industry. This is the same developer that developed Reedy Fork, which is of course the neighborhood community to the south and east of the subject property. So they've been here for a long time and investing in Greensboro and creating one of our most desirable subdivisions and hope to keep doing that. We were also here before you back in the winter with a project for Greenhawk over on McConnell Road that'll bring just over 700 units to that part of our city. So we're back tonight with another request and excited to hopefully have another opportunity to do a high quality neighborhood and continue a good thing at Reedy Fork. So I have Jeremy Medlin with me tonight. He's one of the principals at Greenhawk who's been working on this project. And I also have with me Lee Bryant from Evans Engineering. He's done our civil and design work. And on the line, we have Jeffrey Moore with Gannett Fleming, who conducted our traffic study. So as we go through tonight, if we need to hear from any of those people, they are here and available as needed. Real quick, before I get into my presentation, I'll direct your attention to your vicinity map that you have in your packet. I won't make staff toggle between presentations, but I just want to start out from a zoomed out view. Of course, we're here to discuss land use. This is a zoning case. As you've heard from staff, this is County AG, and we're asking to go to Greensboro Residential 5 with conditions. Of course, that's a single family district. And the reason we chose this is to be compatible, not just compatible, but consistent, fully consistent with the existing Reedy Fork development. And that's important because when you look at your map, you'll note that this subject property is literally wedged between Reedy Fork and the very finite boundary of the Highway 29 corridor. So this is it's a very obvious expansion opportunity for Reedy Fork. And I would submit to you that the continuation of that land use at its current intensity and pattern is the highest and best and most appropriate land use for this property. Case in point, we can look right across the Highway 29 corridor on the other side of 29, and there is a industrial distribution center under construction there now. Of course, this is a highly desirable location for that type of use. Makes a lot of sense on that side of the road, but over here, when you juxtapose it with the existing residences that are here and flourishing, that type of use would really be detrimental to the existing land uses that we have on the ground here. So I think when we zoom out and really think about this from a land use standpoint, I hope we can all start on the same page that single family residential in the current pattern, continuing that really is the best land use. From there, it's really a matter of how do we do that intentionally and thoughtfully and make sure that we pay attention to the site specifics and the circumstances that are on the ground here and make sure we do that land use properly. And that's where our conditions come in. So that's what I want to focus on here tonight. Our first condition speaks to use. We want to limit this to single family. Again, we want to do exactly what we've described and keep that going. Our second condition speaks to density. We've limited this to 284 units. This is just over 111 acres. So that works out to about 2.5 units per acre, which is really relatively low density here in Greensboro. However, that's what makes sense here. You know, just because single family residential is the right land use, we want to keep it at an appropriate scale, and we don't want to do too much for this location. So again, this is all modeled very intentionally to be the right fit, be the right scale and the right scope for this location to continue the feel and the cohesiveness of Reedy Fork. Our third condition, the next three really are ones that we have added as we've gone through this process. We did hold a neighborhood meeting back before Planning and Zoning Commission, and we heard from several neighbors, lots of questions about, you know, what is this, what type of community, what type of homes, but then we boiled down to concerns about traffic impacts. This property is currently accessed via a public street network that has two public street stubs accessing this property. So, we all have seen this before. This is how we plat things. This is our connectivity ordinance at work. So we know this public street network is the by right way to access this property. But again, we want to do so intentionally and thoughtfully and balance those impacts to the existing neighbors with new developments right to use those public streets. So that's what these next conditions really speak to. We worked with your GDOT staff very closely after our neighborhood meeting and before going to planning and zoning to develop these next conditions to do just what I've talked about. This is a multifaceted strategy to make sure that, again, property owners are allowed to use the public streets that are intended for them, but also that existing homeowners don't have to overly bear that burden. So the first thing we did was condition number 2. We took down our density. Originally, we were just over 300 units for our maximum. So now we're at 284, which gets our density down to that 2.5 units per acre, which us and staff felt was more appropriate for the needs I'm describing. Condition 3 speaks to the future opportunity here to connect to the NC 29, Highway 29 corridor. As you're all aware, that corridor is slated for conversion to an interstate. That's an NCDOT project that's on. I checked in with our NCDOT board chairperson today. It's currently in planning. It's not yet funded, but it is on the next round of funding submittals going in. So it is on the horizon. We do have development and designs at our disposal. If we could go to the next slide, please, or I can do that. Thank you. These are the current designs that we have. And we're assured, and your GDOT staff is assured that one important aspect of this that is not going to change is the provision of this service road. So as 29 converts, it will no longer be allowed for anyone to come and get a curb cut and access Highway 29. It'll be controlled access with above grade interchanges like we're used to on other interstates. We'll have an interchange up at McLeansville Road north of this site. So this service road will come off of McLeansville, come south and service these subject properties. When that happens, of course, we can't control NCDOT. We don't manage their timeline, but when they do that, we want to make sure that we're ready and able to avail ourselves to that access opportunity. So condition number 3 that you saw says just that. It says that in any subdivision planning and platting, that our preliminary design process, and of course, what matters is our platting, that we will plan for and have that access platted. And that means that regardless of the sequence of events, when that is available, we won't have shot ourselves in the foot by accidentally building houses where we should have been connecting to Highway 29. So this is a condition to make sure we all remember that and keep that in sight. Our next condition here, number 4, is a sequencing of events to ensure proper traffic distribution, which is again important to make sure we don't overburden the existing roads. The property that you see here in the yellow highlights, that's part of the road network that will be existing to. The existing road network that we'll be connecting to. Currently, this yellow highlighted portion is not fully constructed and open to the public, but it is under construction now. And our condition number 4 states that we're not allowed to plat a single lot until that's open and ready to be traveled. So what that does is it ensures that folks coming out of the subject property onto those stub roads can turn right or left. And that better distributes that traffic to get back down to the spine road. So again, Tierview Lane, which is the right-hand turn, is not overly burdened. That was condition number 4. Condition number 5 is to make sure that we're turning on the faucet at the appropriate speed. So our max here is 284 units, but what we've agreed to here is that we won't plat more than 180 lots until such time that we have a third access point. If you look at our subject property, right now we have 2 existing substreets that serve the property, and under our ordinances that could work for 284 lots. But what we've agreed to do is wait and stop at 180 until we get a third access point. And that could happen a variety of ways. It could be that 29 access that we talked about a moment ago. It could be from one of the other properties to the north or the south that are currently undeveloped. When they develop, of course, our connectivity ordinance will require them to connect to us, and that could provide an access. But regardless, until one of those results occur, we will stop at 180 units. Just a quick run through of our case history. You heard this from Mr. Galante. We did have staff recommendation for approval for the reasons and consistencies and compliance with your comp plan that he stated. We did have a favorable vote from the zoning commission. We did have to come before you for annexation purposes anyway, but also because the numbers that night, to full disclosure, our numbers that night at Planning and Zoning Commission would have required coming to see you two to get a final confirmation of their recommendation. You heard there's a number of speakers signed up. We are aware of some outstanding concerns or issues. I think you'll hear, I won't speak for the neighbors, but I think you'll hear what I've touched on, concerns about the allocation and burden of the trips generated from this site on the existing residential streets. And again, we look forward to hearing those comments, but we have consistently been responsive to that through this process, from the neighborhood meeting when we first heard them to working with GDOT when they voiced some agreement that we could work on that and make that better appropriately scaled for these existing homeowners. And so I hope you'll agree that this multifaceted approach that we've embarked upon with these conditions does strike a reasonable balance between new development using the public streets and existing development continuing to enjoy the public streets. I know there's a concern about construction traffic. Of course, that's the most unpleasant part of development. These roads are built to handle that on an occasional basis. They're public streets built to the appropriate standards. Could they handle tractor trailers every day forever? No, but they can handle it for this occasional use. That said, as I mentioned, Greenhawk Development is heavily invested not only in Greensboro, but in Reedy Fork. They're continuing to build there. They're continuing to sell lots there, trying to attract commercial users there. So they have no interest in creating a mess and walking away and creating any issues for that neighborhood. So to the extent that something were to happen that needs attention from that construction impact, Mr. Medlin is here. He's accountable. Everyone has our contact information, and we'll be the first ones ensuring that those maintenance standards are re-implemented and upheld. Further, we do currently have a little dirt road. It's a logging road that comes off of Highway 29 that gets into this site. That is a DOT controlled item. We, certainly, even if approved tonight, we can't start construction tomorrow. We have a process, your rigorous TRC review for full site planning and getting an approved layout and everything comes next. But if and when we get to the construction time, we are happy to go to DOT and ask for a temporary access permit to be able to take our construction off of Highway 29. We would welcome that opportunity and we will pursue it. We can't offer that as a condition because we don't know if NCDOT will grant us that. And the reason it's a big unknown is because, as we've talked about, they are closing down the access to NC 29 and, homogenizing it at the interchanges. So we have a very real concern that by the time we ask for it, they won't be granting any access points at these locations. That said, though, if we can get it, we will. And we would love to use that. So I know that's been a request. We've heard it. We agree with it. We don't want to make any promises that we can't keep tonight. With that, again, I'll reiterate that my team is here. We're happy to answer questions. We look forward to the dialogue and we welcome your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Hodier?
I just have to, Madam Mayor,
Yes,
may I?
yes, you may.
Yeah, very happy to hear Ms. Hodier about the construction traffic and hopefully looking for that access to keep the traffic out of the community. Just generally, what is the max number of houses that you could build in this community based upon current guidelines?
Current guidelines?
Mm-hmm.
So under AG zoning in the county, I believe they require 1 acre lots currently, because that doesn't contemplate any public utility use, of course. Here, one of the attractive and aspects of this site is that it does have water and sewer availability. We know that from the annexation analysis that your staff has performed, and since they were able to recommend this for annexation, so this case appropriately utilizes that investment from the city and that infrastructure, and finds a better residential zoning district to capture that investment.
All right. And so they're looking at the 284 units that you plan to build. That if it were in the city of Greensboro, that would equate to what type of zoning approximately?
You mean if we weren't conditioning it and
Correct.
artificially compressing it? 2.5 units per acre. Luke, what is that? Would that be R3? R3, I guess, would be the
R3.
closest. Yes, sir. And, we wanted to have that density cap, not only to keep our scale and scope appropriate, but again, when you look at Reedy Fork as a whole, it has a breathability to it. It's got open space, it meanders, it's not just every square inch platted out, and that's what this will be. So we wanted the math to bear that out and give us room for that sort of design flexibility and that same breathability. We've got natural features on this site that we're going to protect. So that density is really more appropriate. But we wanted to do the R5 to keep us homogeneous with the development standards, setbacks, lot sizes, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hightower?
Hi, I had a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Sodian, how you doing? I was going through the opposition and they had some concerns. One of the things they spoke to was the buffering, the tree buffering. What will be, because I don't recall us hearing that, but maybe you did say it.
Right. No,
What is the buffering gonna be? I know you're building houses next to houses, but
right.
I think that was some of
Yeah.
the concern.
Certainly. Thank you for that question. Because this is an R5 conditional request, it's not a PUD. So we have not done a full designed site plan, anything other than, a basic feasibility sketch to facilitate a traffic study. That's really as far as we've gotten in terms of pen to paper. So while yes, as I've just mentioned, there will be green spaces, we're not trying to pack everything in tight and utilize every inch. So certainly, there will be some buffering, there will be some green spaces. But because we haven't, we have a long road ahead of us. We have site plan designing, subdivision design, we have TRC review. And during that process is really where that design work occurs, and we can really look at putting in firm buffering. Right now, because we haven't done that, it's hard to say exactly where we can put 20-foot buffers. And that said, we would ask for that flexibility here because it is like to like. This is single family to single family. Our ordinance doesn't require buffering for that. So certainly we're not in a situation where we're bringing a more intense use to the landscape and we need to protect from those impacts. We are very intentionally being cohesive and continuous here. So while yes, we've heard that, we want to be a good neighbor, we intend to take every effort to do so at this time without fully sitting down and having Mr. Bryant do a full design to take in all the moving parts. It's just pretty impossible to design for that one aspect and still know that you'll be able to size your stormwater pond appropriately over here or meet your road curvature radii over here. So it's really just a difficult leap to try and plan and commit for that one thing without doing the whole thing. So we're asking to be able to take this in steps, but we have heard that we do want to be good neighbors. And again, I think the best checks and balance element that you have is the fact that this developer is the same developer that brought us Reedy Fork. And again, they do not want to damage that legacy or its continued potential because, the best of Reedy Fork is still to come. So I think that they have a huge skin in this game and they're going to look after that. Thank you.
Thank you. So we do have a number of speakers signed up to speak in against. I don't have an order in which you want to speak. I don't know if you've developed an order with the group. You do have a total of 15 minutes. So if you, I don't want it. If nobody gets up, I'll just start calling them in the order of which I have them. And if you would give us your name, please.
My name is Vivian Bird. I live on Tierview Trail. I understand that development and growing the city are good things. I am not opposed to the development of the homes or to Greenhall. They have done a wonderful job at Reedy Fork. We just want it to be done safely since we have a lot of children in the neighborhood. Those two entrances, they'll need to take that construction traffic and then they would need to sustain the traffic of the new homes. Really, all I'm looking for is that alternate entrance to go in there and build. That's really all I'm looking at.
And I guess there's no way to guarantee that alternate entrance at this point.
I understand that, but that's my main concern.
Thank you. Next speaker.
My name is,
We have somebody at the podium and then whoever that was on Zoom, you will be next. If you would give us your name for the record, please.
Karen Watts Yehuda. And I am not against the development or the developers. I just think there should be modifications put in favor of the residents. First of all, thank you to the mayor and to the city council for hearing us. We certainly do appreciate the opportunity. We enjoy our beautiful properties and our yards. We want to have that buffer, 20, 25 feet, whatever you can give us, to buffer us from the one community to the next. We do not want to live on top of one another. When we bought our homes, especially those of us who bought on Tier Trail, we were told that we would have this space. We also knew that it belonged to another property and something might be built there. So here is our opportunity to address that fact. We do believe that if they are able to stipulate that they've got 284 homes ready to be built, that they have some idea of where these houses are going. So to be able to put in that buffer at the onset seems to be feasible from what they said. We know it's important to increase the population, but reducing the number of homes will not significantly change how Greensboro grows. So we're asking that if the neighborhood needs to be reduced by a few homes in order to create this buffer, we're asking you to instill that in whatever approvals you give. We are your constituency, you are our representatives. And though the developers have worked with Greensboro over the past few years, and we appreciate that and a good relationship, we appreciate that as well. But we're the people who live here and we're the people who live in that particular community. So we're looking to you for your support for the community that currently lives there and took the mortgage to go out and live in this community. So we're hoping that you will be supportive of us. The developers have been very thankful for your support of them. We want to be just as thankful for your support of us. One thing I will say, I've worked in government for a number of years and retired. And the one thing that I heard over and over again during this process in my community was that they're not going to listen to us. They don't care. And as a person who was in leadership for many years, it hurt me to my heart. It really did. That this country and this particular city has come to the point where they don't trust what you'll do. And that's kind of why I'm standing here. I'm new to Greensboro, relatively speaking. And I'm certainly new to Tier Trail. But I really do believe that you answer to us, that you respond to us, that you listen to us, that you care about what we say. And I'm hoping that you'll hear our voices and really take it to heart when you vote. Thank you.
Thank you. I did hear somebody on Zoom.
yeah, that would be,
Please.
my name is Felicia Angus.
Go ahead.
And I've been in Reedy Fort for over 16 years. I don't necessarily have a problem with additional homes, but I would like for us to get some support on some additional things as we're doing that. For example, we are already having issues with the lift station overflowing with the homes that we have now. So I'm not sure if part of the plan, if those things are being addressed. Also, in the beginning of building a community, there were some things that we were that was discussed, like in library, maybe a police station. We've requested some of these things in the past, still have not seen those things. We do have a fire station, so thank you for that, because we didn't have that in the beginning. We have a lot of speeding on that road already, and then in addition to add construction traffic as well. Hopefully we'll have a plan for that. Coming into the Reedy Fort community, we're already doing the highway. All the trees have been knocked down. So I too would like to make sure that we have that buffering in the community so that we can continue to be the Reedy Fort with the breathability, space where we can walk. And I really hope that we're not going to be crowded on top of each other. And let's see. And there are other things that the community would like to see, and especially the police and libraries. If we're going to increase the community, we do need more support from the city. So that is all I have to say, and thank you for taking the time to listen to me.
Thank you. Our next speaker.
Hello, this is Robert Bingham.
Thank you.
I live on Tier Trail, and my concerns have to do with the construction traffic. The two stub streets would have to bear the burden of hauling out all of the tree debris, dirt, etc. And there's not, it's just not a good thing for the current residents. And there was minimal provision in the proposal for considering the impact of this site preparation work even prior to actually building homes. There was mention of a dirt road. The DOT, there should be an encroachment permit allowed. And that, I don't know if that's been pursued or not, but it's just not a good thing, I don't believe, to expect, even though Tier Trail is a public road, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's open for heavy construction equipment. We're talking about bulldozers, large backhoes, compactors, and the trucks needed to bring them in. In addition, as I mentioned, all of the tree debris has to be hauled out, and the cement pipes or the sewage equipment has to be brought in. And for example, that site on the corner of Turner Smith Road and Reedy Fort Parkway has been worked on for well over a year, and it's not anywhere near where they're going to be building homes yet. And how is it proposed to unload, for example, a semi-trailer full of cement pipes with a forklift if you don't park the semi on Tier Trail and block a few people's driveways in the process? So my strong recommendation is that DOT be approached and an encroachment permit be obtained by the developer. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker.
Yes, I can go first. I can go now.
Go ahead, please give us your name.
Yes, my name is Alejandro Rosa. Thanks for the opportunity. And I sent the presentation, so I'm not sure if you can put it up, please. In the meantime, you pull my presentation. I'm against for all the what the community is speaking about, and I have some additional, because when I'm I don't hear a clear response about the buffer for the trees. But what I can say is that if you go to slide number first over there, that first slide, I'm not sure if we consider this. I'm not opposed to development, but I'm opposed to development that doesn't match with the environment. On that area, there is a stormwater. There is a watershed over there that connects with the Reedy Fork River. And I'm concerned that in some way we will cause some kind of flooding, or maybe we will decrease the amount of water that goes to that river. And so I'm opposed without that. I believe that in the Greensboro law, there is an ordinance in terms of protecting these watersheds and also to create some buffer zones for the watersheds. And this is an area where you have a lot of, animals, and you have a lot of, environmental. I believe that there is an opportunity over there. But if you go to the next slide, in this slide, there is a clear prohibition about building in watersheds. This is, from your webpage. And I believe that this is important for me because it is not just about the water for the agricultural, but it's also about the water related with the watershed for the Reedy Fork. If you go to the next slide, please. This is also an area that is considered a high priority for agricultural. And when you think about agricultural, it's not just about the area where you do the agricultural per se, but also for agricultural of water that comes from here to other different areas. And I don't believe with that it will be responsible to give an approval if there is no clear plans or not much information about this development. There is also, I was reading 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago, I think so, it's about this, there is a disease currently affecting deers, and there is I believe this is a state prohibition about, trying to move deers from one place to the other, or have this pushing, this migration of deers because of this disease. And I believe this is not a good moment to do this type of development. But that's what I have. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. We have 3 minutes and 14 seconds left. Is there another speaker?
Yes, hello. My name is Kimberly. Can you hear me?
Yes. Kimberly Boston.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to bring up a couple of points. First one is also to piggyback on what everybody else said. We haven't seen any detailed plans. We would like to have a buffer. We would like to have the natural beauty because we have all paid extra money, extra premiums and money for, the lots to face the trees. And this is the natural beauty of Reedy Fork. Also, the trees and the stream areas, the dust, the mold, once you start, doing construction, all that stuff gonna be kicked up. A lot of us people here are retired, and we're gonna be home for all the noise, the dust, and the construction. And I'm not against the building. I'm worrying about also the safety of the children, pets, damage to cars. What else here? What else do I need to see? We haven't seen any detailed plans or anything like that. I just wrote some points down. And also I submitted a petition with names. I don't know if you guys got it, but it's more so we don't even know any details of what's going on. They're going to be using Tier Trail, coming through with trucks, removing trees. And it's just, I don't think these roads can handle that. We don't even have the final layer of asphalt. They haven't even put that on. And it's going to be constant hauling in and out, dirt, trucks, noise. And I've lived here. I've lived on Red Pole Drive, and I lived on under a hill. So I moved from one area thinking that I was safe to move here to face the beauty and have the trees. If they're going to remove all of the trees, we don't have any trees here left in Reedy Fork. because they're doing it. They're building by the school. They removed all those trees. That used to be a beautiful area with trees that I would look at every day. And that's why I moved here and I chose to live here because of the beauty. And they took out all those trees. They took out all the trees on the backside. These people had their homes for 20 years and they have forests and trees. Those are gone now. They left maybe 3 trees. So now where we live, that's like the only area that has trees, and they're going to take those. So our thing is mostly, we just want to have a natural buffer. I want to see trees. I want to see animals. I used to see deers. I don't even see deers anymore because of all of the construction going on. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, there is 33 seconds, but there will also be a 5-minute rebuttal. If you want to start, you can come back for 5 minutes also.
Well, I'll be brief. They've actually said, my name's Richard McNamara. They've already said a lot of what I was going to say, but I do want to bring up again that point about the wetlands. There's a stream there that forks into 3 branches. I can't see building on that. And the idea, like I mentioned, she had just added that we did pay extra for the premium lots there. It's not just a case of having the buffer. Seems like they just come in, they sell off all the trees, they take all the topsoil off and clear cut everything. They should incorporate some green space and maybe walking paths.
If you want, if you've got more to say, you can certainly do it during the 5-minute rebuttal period.
Thank you.
In the meantime, we'll start the rebuttal with the applicants.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to start off by acknowledging that we've really had a thoughtful dialogue with the neighbors this whole time, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the courteous manner which it's been handled and the thoughtfulness that I think is added to this case. And really, you've heard that already. You know, we got those comments early on. That's the benefit of the neighborhood meeting, and the neighbors have been consistent in that ask, and staff has helped us carry that through. You know, we've committed to those here tonight with you on the record. And so I think now it's just a question of, you know, asking that question of, is this the reasonable balance to allocate, you know, this public street network, this plan that created these stub roads to access this property and its future development potential. You know, I certainly am not aware of any premiums that were paid on these lots. Obviously, I wasn't there, but that, you know, if that was something that happened with the previous real estate attorney, I certainly hate to hear that. But you know, when this property came on the market, my client said, you know, if that's going to be developed, it really should be done right. It should be done in a way that preserves and protects. And, you know, certainly I understand the view from your deck is, you know, something we all love and enjoy. But we also want to make sure that we don't put a de facto moratorium on this property while we wait for DOT and while we wait for, you know, dust to settle. Our city's booming. It's bringing a lot of new stuff, and with all those economic development announcements, we have to have the housing that underpins all that. We've had a housing crisis already. It's only going to get worse. So I really hope that we can, you know, properly consider these requests to make sure that we are providing for that need in a thoughtful way, and you know, holding developers to a high bar to mitigate impacts. And I think we've done that here. You heard about our low density. We talked about that. That gives that the math bears it out. There will be green space. This community will have its own HOA with its own common elements that give both passive and active recreation space. You've heard about our acknowledgement that yes, construction traffic off of Highway 29 would be better. We will absolutely pursue that. We agree with Mr. Bingham and others who said that. We simply can't make it a condition because we're not the party who can grant it. But yes, we agree. We would like to see that. I do want to turn it over to Mr. Bryant, our engineer, to talk about some of the stormwater and watershed questions we heard.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Lee Bryant with Evans Engineering. It's 4609 Dundas Drive. Just wanted to thank Alexandria for bringing up the watershed stuff, because that was one thing that we didn't bring up in the presentation, because this is more land use. But once you get into the design of this, there will be design features in this as part of, for the watershed. It'll be a stormwater devices in here. And this is when we look at it to make sure there's not going to be downstream flooding. The city of Greensboro has watershed provisions, very extensive watershed provisions that prevent that. And they do studies for our pre-development, what the rate of runoff is to what the post-development is. And we take that into consideration when doing the design for that. And we'll have devices that if the downstream stuff can't handle that, we retain the water on the site with a water quantity device. And that also is a water quality device, which also protects the natural environment from pollutants going downstream. This is a very common practice. I'm sure everybody sees that around town now. And they can be via ponds, sand filters, all types of different watershed devices, but they are there to prevent any pollution or downstream flooding for that. And as far as buffers and preserving trees, this site has a lot of topography on it. And that's part of the design, is you try to follow topography the best you can. Nobody wants to try to fight the environment and build something that's not compatible with it. So you follow the features the best you can, and then you stay out of the streams and the wetlands. We'll have those mapped. We have a consultant that goes out and maps all the streams and wetlands, and there are buffers associated with those streams and wetlands. And any impacts that are done on that have to be approved by the Army Corps and the DEQ from the state. So that's all above board and all has to be brought above the state before you start any construction on the site. All that has been reviewed and looked at. And then off the streams, there will be buffers where all the trees have to remain as part of Greensboro's buffer requirements for that. So thank you. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicants? Mrs. Thurm?
Just a quick question about the lift station overflow issue that was brought up. Can you address that, or do I need to ask that of city staff?
I have not heard anything about a lift station overflowing with a sewage problem. I don't know if there was something with the stream or something down below that they may think about, but I'm not aware of that. The lift station was down years and years ago, so I don't know if there's Greensboro staff that can answer that.
I'll just reiterate while staff is coming, that, we do have to do an annexation analysis as part of this request. So this was vetted by Mike Borchers and the Water Resources Department. So I believe we would have heard about that if there were an issue, or you would have heard about it, but certainly happy to hear from them tonight.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council. Mike Borchers, Greensboro Water Resources Director. And we have not had any overflows of the lift station. We have had instances due to storm events and releases from Lake Townsend where we've had an issue at it. But as far as an overflow due to the station being overtaxed, that has not happened.
Any other questions for the applicants? Hey, those in opposition, you do have a 5-minute rebuttal. If you would like to introduce yourself. We do have a speaker coming to the.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, while he's coming, I did have a question for the.
Okay, Mrs. Hightower.
Hi, thank you. Before you speak, sir, could 1 second, sorry, I apologize. Amanda, I think I hear a lot of concerns from the neighbors around the buffering and the streams, et cetera. And I know you don't have plans currently, but I think it's important that people, even like myself, I'm visual, so I need to see things, how it's laid out, what's proposed, what street, what cul-de-sac, whatever. When do you plan to put something together? Because I think it's critically important to the neighbors. They are right. They are our neighbors now and our constituents as well. And so we need to hear what they're saying. And that is a concern when you don't know exactly how it's mapped out. What are your plans to do that? And then what are your plans for continual dialogue with this community?
Certainly. Thank you for that question. So as you know, your process here in Greensboro does not require, a site-specific plan to come before you with a conditional zoning request, which I'll just take a moment and say is really very, it's very thoughtful and it acknowledges that this is a process. It goes from land use to site-specific design to construction, evaluating construction viability to actual permits. So we are marching along that process. And at land use, we're trying to evaluate what is the highest and best use and in what way does it function correctly. So, I think one speaker did make the point, well, they must know something if they know 284 houses can go there. And yes, that's right. We do obviously, and as I mentioned, our traffic engineer has to be able to evaluate, the worst case scenario of what we're proposing. So we do know that, yes, these will fit with a road network that we think is about what we will have to do. However, it has not been through your technical review committee process, which is zoning, which is transportation, which is water resources that we've heard about. It's the fire department, it's the police department. They're checking the turning radius. They're checking our stormwater runoff calculations. So at a certain point, and this is why I appreciate your process to not require that up front. At a certain point, it becomes a little irresponsible to show something that hasn't been vetted. To show something and give people that visual and put something in their mind's eye that we then come back and say, oh, that didn't work. Sorry, it didn't pass muster at TRC. So, we do try to give as many conditions as we can to give that predictability. That's why we talk about use. That's why we talk about limiting the number so that you can, appreciate and have a feel for that intensity rather than just saying, okay, 5 times 111 is X. We do try to give as many nuggets of information as possible without having to go so far down that road and then, pull back from it and create a credibility issue or a trust issue. But I think your point is the correct one, which is, what happens next? If this does get approved, obviously we will have to get to those specific designs. And I think we can continue this dialogue. Just because this public hearing is over doesn't mean that we all know each other now through this process. They have my contact information. I have some of theirs, some of the speakers I don't have, but I think we'd be happy to continue to engage in that discussion. Anything that we submit to the city going forward is obviously public record. But again, the onus doesn't have to be on the neighbors to come and request that. I'm happy to continue to put my information out there. I have direct contact to Greenhawk and we can share those plans and keep people informed if this case gets to progress. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I appreciate that. And yes, I know there are certain things that aren't mandatory, but you brought up a good point about trust. And that's where community doesn't trust. Yes, this is about land use, but it's also about future land use of people using that land once they're there. And once those that have been there using their land, it's already there.
Yes,
and so I think it's important that we're cognizant of that fact and that we maintain a great relationship with our community as we grow. We know how important it is to grow, but I think we just can't be dismissive or of people's concerns, and so I appreciate you doing the extra due diligence on the process.
Thank you for those comments. We can certainly make sure that we keep talking after tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we do have time for the opponents. Mr. McNamara?
The only other thing I wanted to add is they've keep saying that they'll have access to make lefts and rights from Tier Trail, some of the other roads there, from the stubs. But all those roads, including the new section that they're building, which is only halfway done, Biederhoff, I think it is, or something like that. All of them still take you to Reedy Ford Parkway, which is the main way in and out. And that's where the bottlenecks occur. And every day when the school is letting out, people come to pick up their kids and they just line up out all the way out and down Rudy Ford Parkway. And it could be 20 minutes to half an hour. You can't even get through there because it's not wide enough to accommodate cars going through plus people parked on the road. It's only one lane at that point. So, and the other way out does take you over to McLeansville Road, but that's a long ways around to get back. Most people, I think, are going to Greensboro. And so that's why they go up to Summit Avenue and get on 29. And if you're going to McLeansville, you're going north to get onto 29 to come back south to get to Greensboro over a lot of rural areas. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Any other speakers in opposition?
Yes, this is Robert Bingham. I couldn't help noticing a contrast between the previous motion or proposal. I think it was on, it was a proposal to rezone, and the proposal included a site layout showing the townhomes, et cetera, and yet we apparently can't be provided that for this proposal. So I don't know what the difference is. The other thing is, it's, I guess, more of a question. Is the DOT like stonewalling, or what? Do they have a problem with granting access to provide a construction entrance off 29 into this property? That's all I have. Thank you.
Any other speakers in opposition?
Well, before that, do you know whether, to answer that question about the Department of Transportation, are they stonewalling? Are they being cooperative? Are they what?
It's really more of a ripeness issue. You know, we can't really ask for a speculative permit. So, you know, I think on the one hand, we have the logging road there, so that would seem to be an advantage. On the other hand, as I mentioned, we do know that they are in preparation for the conversion to the interstate corridor. We do know that they're tamping down on those on-grade access points. So I just don't know where on that spectrum we will fall, but you know, we don't really get, you don't really get very far when you go with a request for something that doesn't exist yet, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Felicia Angus. I do have one last question to find out. With the homes being built, are there going to be some type of limit of how many will be sold to investors, and then we have more renters, or is it going to be like 50-50 home ownership, 50-50 investors buying to rent? Has that been considered?
Unfortunately, we can't consider that as part of the zoning process. We just have to consider the land use, which would be the number of houses, not the cost or who they would be sold to. Unfortunately, that is just not one of the zoning considerations that we are allowed to consider.
Okay, thank you for that information, and I appreciate it.
Any other speakers in against?
Move to close the public hearing.
Okay, so that was moved by Mayor Pro Tem, seconded by Mrs. Boozwaiter. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Council comments or motion? Mr. Boozwaiter, and then Mr. Holston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As we all know, Greensboro is expanding toward the east. The east is the only area that we can actually go into. And with the way that the Reedy Fork has been built, the way that the developers have been very, very cautious and conservative on how they have gone about things. I do understand that there are concerns about transportation and how people are going to get in and out, but I truly, truly believe that the developers and of course Amanda and her team are going to do everything they can to alleviate that. As has been stated before, we need housing.
Badly.
We need housing desperately. And I would find it very hard to vote against such a good plan as this. We know that Reedy Fork was going to be expanded. Some of the roadways were built for that. I do understand, of course, the concern about when the parkway is backed up. I understand all that, but you know, we've got to go ahead and move ahead. And I really do feel for the people who thought they were going to be looking at the woods and when they bought their homes. I don't know how that happened either, because I know we had woods next to us when we bought our home in 1993, and I was like, yay, this is wonderful. And then it got sold and a house was built there. So it's going to happen. This is the only area that Greensboro can grow into. And with the economic development boom that we're having right now, boom, if you want to call it, you know, we've got to be able to provide housing. Is this going to be built overnight? No. Of course not. It's going to take time. They have to go through the TRC process. So that is where the environmental concerns come up, where everything is absolutely taken apart and laid on the table, and make sure that everything follows every single rule and regulation, and especially the environmental concerns. So I have every reason to believe that this will be a wonderful development, and I'm certainly going to vote for it. And Madam Mayor, I'd like to make the motion when the time is appropriate.
Okay, if we can. Hold on. Okay, so we have a motion and a second, but I think we still have some comments. Mr. Holston?
Yes, my first comment is that it's awfully good to look to my right and see Mary Kay sitting there. And hear your voice. I'm going to say the very same thing that Mary Kay has talked about. I've been all across the city, and one of the words that I often hear is about housing, about affordable housing. What can we do about it? What are our plans? One of the first things we can do is increase our housing stock. That's just one of the critical first things we can do. And this effort does that. I'm also listening to people in all the districts. And one thing that I do stress is that density in our neighborhoods, in our communities, is probably going to be something that we're going to have to become more accustomed to. With the boom in jobs coming, they're between, depending on how you count, between 5,000 and 8,000 jobs over the next several years. Those folks, we hope that they live in the city of Greensboro, and we hope that they come and they enjoy our community and pay taxes and the whole 9 yards, but they're going to have a place to lay their head. In order for us to do that, we're going to have to find ways to build the housing, get the housing here, and that is going to result in some increases in density in neighborhoods that may not have seen it before. So I'm just excited that the housing is here. I'm also very excited that if they're at Reedy Fork, that they're mimicking what is already at Reedy Fork, and not trying to go with an even higher density, but making it comfortable enough so that I think it's R5, but it's going to look like an R3, so to speak. But very, very excited about the housing stock. I was going to move the item, but Mary Kay, very happy, very happy.
We'll get you on the next item.
Absolutely.
That one. Any other comments, Mrs. Thurm?
Like the others, I'm very happy to see this plan come before us. One of the things that gives me great peace and comfort in being able to support this is that it is the same developer that did the initial investment in Reedy Fork. They currently have more properties and more to go there. So they realize how important it is to maintain the quality and the lifestyle for those folks that are already there, and they want to build on that. That gives me great comfort in being able to support this because it is the same developer. And I don't know that I would have the same level of comfort if it was somebody new coming along with, new opportunities and want to maximize that particular lot. But I think the fact that we've got the same developer that wants to expand on the positive value of the current Reedy Fork community gives me great peace, and I hope it will be of some comfort, and those that are currently living there will find that this neighborhood just melds right with theirs. And while they each will probably have their own personality, I look forward to supporting this item.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I just would hope that
And
y'all
so-
would do some affordable housing soon. I would love to see you do that. Your track record is great. So we need affordable housing, and we need this kind of housing as well. So I support it.
affordable at all levels. Yeah, our inventory is very low.
Yeah.
Mrs.
And
Hightower?
I'll make this brief because everybody said the appropriate comments and we do need housing, yes. But what I would like to say about this, we see a lot of zoning cases. This was not contentious at all. Both sides were very open and honest with each other, but they're very respectful of each other. And I see that partnership continuing, and I hope that it does, because it's critically important that once you develop and you're gone, they're still there. And they need to have that comfort level of knowing that what you've built and designed will fit in to their community as well, and you set a standard. So I appreciate that very much. I look forward to what the builder's gonna do at McConnell. It gives me great hope and peace that you're working this well with these neighbors. You'll do the same in the future as well. So I think it will be a good project. But neighbors, just know we heard you, and we'll be all following to make sure that it happens the way they say it should happen. So, thank you. And I'll be supportive.
Mr. Outland?
Yes, I'll likewise be supportive. I think an excellent point that the applicant made in kind of explaining the process is explaining what zoning decisions are really about. That's what's the highest and best use of the land. To what degree is the application, the proposed use compatible with what's there now and what's a strong vision for a particular area within the city? And so for me, I certainly recognize the applicant has done wonderful work, but quite frankly, it's not about the applicant's great work in the past. Recognizing that property can change ownership. And so what's really important is to focus on what's the highest and best use of the land. Here in that vein, a point that was persuasive to me was, what are the possible uses for this property, including what would be there right now? And if you look at the existing arrangement, the existing community, to have relatively low density residential and possibly have in the future an industrial use or something that's not, to the applicant's point, as consistent as this application is to what's there now, I think that this is a strong application for that reason. A number of community members on the call and in person raised some really excellent points about buffers, about water-related issues, all excellent points. With regard to the buffers, I don't think it's been stated, but to be quite frank, I think it would have been great to have information about a buffer. I think that that would have addressed a lot of concerns. The reality, however, is that the city council cannot require that an applicant add a buffer. And so we have to accept the application or reject the application as it's presented. For me, at least, for the reasons I explained, it crosses that threshold of being an application that's worthy of support, although I do think it is a valid concern with regard to the buffers. And certainly would love to see, hopefully, the applicant, should it maintain possession of this property and develop the property, give thoughtful consideration to adding or maintaining a buffer there. I think staff obviously addressed the water issues, but I also think that's an important thing to understand. The city does have processes and requirements around water issues. The city has a number of requirements that go to the site design. That's just not the process that we have right now. And so certainly if the applicant does not comply with those processes, and we hear from applicants a lot lamenting about having to work their way through those processes, based on my experience, I'm fairly confident that the city staff would reject that application. They would stop that application and there would be no development. So again, for those reasons, I'm supporting the application and appreciate the presentations and comments by both the applicant as well as concerned community members.
Dr. Wells?
Rita Fork is in District 2, so you know I'm torn. I'm not against progress, but I have constituents in Reedy Fork. They've talked to me. They've told me their concerns. I've talked to the attorney and I've done all I could, but you've heard all of the ayes already. But I want the developer to be considerate as you build, because we know that it's going to happen. We have the votes, but the citizens, that live there, I heard their concerns and I know how they feel. I have a friend who moved there and she had all of the space around her. And then before long, houses were everywhere and she was complaining. And I'm a tree person, so I hated that you've lost your trees. So I'm voting no to be in sync with my constituents. I'm not against progress. I also realize that the East is the only place we're going to grow. I'm realizing that all of us are going to have growing pains and there are going to be houses built where we thought there would always be some empty land or some trees. So it's going to happen, but I'm standing with my Reedy Fork folks when I vote no, but I'm not against progress.
Thank you. So we do have a motion by Ms. Abuzawader and a second by Mrs. Hoffman for the annexation. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman? Yes. Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
No.
Mrs.
Yes.
Johnson? I'm a yes. Mrs. Abuzawader?
Yes.
Mr. Outling?
Yes.
Mrs. Stern?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hightower?
I'm a yes, but Goldie, I'm with you in spirit. I get that. I do. So, thank you.
So are
Unfortunately,
you reported as a yes?
yeah, I'm gonna be a yes.
I understand.
But you know, seriously, I mean, I've been there, so it's hard. I mean, it really is hard.
It is.
You
So
know,
this passes 8-1, but let me say, you know, we are up against a lot of these zoning decisions. We hear a lot of times where existing neighborhoods didn't expect certain things. And I was speaking to an attorney recently and he told me that all the easy stuff has been done already, that we are going to be looking at infill. And we have been looking at infill rezonings for at least the last year and a half. And, you know, we are going to hear more like this, but I do feel good that the developers really have an open line of communication with the neighborhood. And I feel that that will continue because they have a vested interest in making sure that your neighborhood stays happy. And we will continue to work with you, especially on traffic concerns, because we know that that is something that we can influence. And I am sure that the construction vehicles will be respectful of the existing neighborhood and the school. So I think that as we work together, we can make this a positive development. Thank you. So with that, we need a motion and a statement of consistency. Moved by Mr. Holston, seconded by Mrs. Abuzawader. Mr. Holston?
Yes. The Greensboro City Council believes that its action to approve the zoning request for the properties described as 6462 and 6468 and 6468 ZZ US Highway 29 North from County AG Agricultural to City CD R5 Residential Single Family 5 to be consistent with the adopted GSO 2040 Comprehensive Plan and considers the action taken to be reasonable and the public interest for the following reasons. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan's future built form map and future land use map. The proposed city CDR5 zoning district as conditioned permits uses which fit the context of surrounding area and limits negative impacts on the adjacent properties. And the request is reasonable due to the size, physical conditions, and other attributes of the area. It will benefit the property owner and surrounding community, and approval is in the public interest.
Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
No.
Mrs.
Yes.
Johnson? I am a yes. Mrs. Abuzawader?
Yes.
Mr. Outling?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm?
Yes.
Mrs. Hightower?
yes.
And that passes 8-1. Thank you. We now move on to items number H7 and H8. I do have a house cleaning question. There is a Mr. Greg Garrett. Are you signed up to speak for or against? For? Okay, so we have one speaker for. Item number H7 is a public hearing for an ordinance annexing territory into the corporate limits for property located at 4,000, 4,012, 4,022, 4040, 4044, and 4054 Randleman Road and 4800, 4806, 808, 810, 811, 812, and 4816 Cofield Road, 1.10889 acres, Molly Fox, James Doggett, Jack Doggett, and Doggett Farm LLC. And item number H8, a public hearing for an ordinance for original zoning for 4,000, 4,012, 4,022, 4,040, 4,044, and 4,054 Randleman Road, and 4,800, 4,806, 4,810, 4,811, 4,812, and 4,816 Cofield Road, Amanda Hodiern, on behalf of Molly Doggett Fox and others.
I'll move H7.
Well, we need a brief
You
presentation.
can't keep moving stuff. Slow down. Good Lord of mercy. You don't give us no chance.
So if Mr. Galante, if you could give us a brief presentation, and then I believe we have a speaker to answer questions if needed. Okay.
Certainly, thank you.
Galante?
Thank you. This annexation has an associated original zoning request to rezone the property from county agricultural and county RS 30 to city plan unit development. The majority of the property in the vicinity is zoned county agricultural, except for the property along Randleman Road, which has a county non-residential designation, and the property located to the northwest, which has a city designation of conditional district R5. The property itself contains single-family houses and is mostly undeveloped, as is the property in the vicinity, except for that along Randleman Road, which has non-residential uses, and the property to the northwest, as I described in the city limits, has been developed with residential uses. This land is shown as residential on the future land use map and commercial, and is shown as ex-urban and urban on the future built form map. This is a conditional district, and there are 3 conditions. They added 2 of those conditions at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, and would like to add a 3rd condition. So procedurally, I need to read that condition and have council accept it by vote.
Thank you.
The new condition is condition number 3, which states a minimum 30-foot wide landscape buffer shall be provided in the location indicated with the label 30-foot buffer on the Unified Development Plan. The buffer shall include the existing mature canopy trees and 10 evergreen screen hedge plantings, such as green giants, per 100 linear feet. To ensure continuous year-round screening, any new required planting shall be of an evergreen material.
Okay, do we have a motion to accept that?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Hightower, seconded by Ms. Abuzawader. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. City staff recommended approval of this request because it was consistent with the comprehensive plan's built form map and future land use map, and that the proposed zoning request supports both the comprehensive plan's creating great places goal and the building community connections goal. This proposal, the proposed plan unit development zoning designation as conditioned, would allow a mix of residential uses that are complementary to the surrounding area and expand housing choices in close proximity to a major thoroughfare. The Planning and Zoning Commission also recommended approval of this original zoning request at their March Planning Board meeting. That concludes the presentation. I'll now open it up for the public hearing.
Okay, we do have a one speaker in favor. You're welcome to speak or answer questions. Okay. Council, do we need a presentation or can we go to a motion?
Move H7.
Okay, so there's no
I'm coming
public
to
hearing
get
to
up.
close. So we do have a motion on H7 by Mayor Pro Tem, second
I'll second.
by Mrs. Hightower. Council, please vote, and this will be on the annexation.
Mhm.
Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Mrs. Abuzawader?
Yes.
Mr. Outling?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm?
Yes.
Mrs. Hightower?
Yeah.
And that passes
Yes.
9-0. Item number H8, we will require a statement of consistency.
Move the item.
Moved by Mrs. Hightower, seconded by Mr. Holston. Mrs. Hightower?
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Zoning amendment statement by the city council on consistency with the adopted comprehensive plan and reasonableness. The Greensboro City Council believes that its action to approve the zoning request for the properties described at 4,000, 4,012, 4,022, 4040, 4,040 rather, 4,044, and 4,054 Ranneman Road, and 4,000, 4,800, 4,806, 4,808, 4,810, 4,811, 4,812, and 4,816 Cofield Road from County AG Agricultural and County RS 40 Residential Single Family to City PUD Plan Unit Development to be consistent with the adopted GSO 2040 Comprehensive Plan and considers the action taken to be reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, future built format, form map, and future land use map. The proposed city PUD zoning district as conditioned permits uses which fit the content of the surrounding area and limits negative impacts to the adjacent properties. The request is reasonable due to the size, physical conditions, and other attributes of the area. It will benefit the property owner and surrounding community, and approval is in the public interest.
Thank you. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson, I'm a yes. Mrs. Boothway?
Yes.
Mr. Outling?
Yes.
Mrs. Sturm?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hightower?
Yes.
And that passes 9-0. We will now move on to item number H9, and we do have a number of speakers. I believe signed up for that. H9 is an ordinance for public hearing for rezoning located at a portion of 8625 and all of 8627, 8629 McGuire Road, and 210 Krasinski Lane. Bill Maher for Gregory Robinson. In the meantime, before we do that, I need a little housekeeping. I need you to tell me if you are for or against Rafael Ramirez. For. Charles Winfrey. For. Gregory Robertson. Lena Foster. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for, and 2 opposed. Mr. Galante,
Great.
if you could give us a brief overview.
Thank you. This rezoning case contains 6.18 acres and is a request to rezone the property from its current designation, residential 3, to conditional district light industrial. The abutting property is also zoned R3 in the city's jurisdiction. The existing use located on the property contains single-family dwellings, undeveloped land, and an unpermitted landscape contractor use. The surrounding property contains residential uses. This land is shown as future employment area on our future land use map and as urban general on the built form map. This conditional district light industrial has several conditions, and these are new conditions that have been added to the request since the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And again, procedurally, I need to read these conditions into the record and have council accept them by vote. First one is use is limited to landscaping and horticultural services, including recycling tree limbs and other wood. Condition number 2 is any wood chipping equipment operating on the property will be enclosed on 3 sides by solid walls a minimum of 10 feet in height. Condition 3 is the operation of wood chipping machinery will be limited to the hours of 8 a.m. through 5 p.m. from Monday through Friday, No wood chipping machinery will be operated on Saturday or Sunday. Condition number 4 states a landscape buffer yard, a minimum 20 feet in width, shall be established along the property frontage adjacent to McGuire Road, excluding the 50-foot area for vehicular traffic entrance and exit, as shown on Exhibit A dated April 19th, 2022. The minimum planting rate within this required buffer yard shall be 3 canopy trees, 5 understory trees, and 25 shrubs per 100 linear feet. Condition number 5 states that the applicant's trucking deliveries and shipments will be limited to travel a maximum distance of 450 feet on McGuire Road from the right-of-way from South Bunker Hill Road. And the final condition, condition number 6, states that overall building height shall not exceed 30 feet.
Thank
Can I get a
you.
vote to
Do
accept
we
those,
have a
please?
motion to accept?
So move.
Moved by Mrs. Johnson, seconded by Mrs. Bushwaiter. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously.
Thank you. City staff recommended approval of this rezoning request since it was consistent with the future land use designation and built form designation in the comprehensive plan. It was also consistent with the comprehensive plan growing economic competitiveness, big idea. And the proposed zoning district will allow landscaping and horticultural service uses which are in their normal operation have little or no adverse effect on the adjoining properties. This rezoning request was denied by the Planning and Zoning Commission at their February meeting. The applicant has appealed, and that is why we're at City Council tonight. So I will open it up for the public hearing.
Thank you. Mr. Winfrey? And again, 15 minutes, both for and against, notwithstanding the number of speakers.
H9. No, not the exhibit. Yep, that one.
Madam Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and members of council, my name is Chuck Winfrey. My office is here at 100 South Elm Street here in Greensboro. And I have the pleasure of representing Mr. Greg Robertson, who is here. He has been in the wood recycling business for 13 years, and 3 of those years have been at the actual site that we're talking about tonight. As staff indicated, Mr. Robertson is seeking to be allowed a very narrow light industrial use for this property, and we have tried to attach sufficient conditions to this request to make this a feasible use and compatible use of the property. This property is actually located in the, what I might call the western fringes of the city. It actually has a Colfax address or Colfax address. It's almost in Kernsville. Mr. Robertson has invested a great deal to operate a recycling center on this property, improvidently doing so before he had a proper rezoning to do so. So we are here making a request that this be deemed or be rezoned to allow this particular use on this property with the additional conditions that we have presented tonight. We can see this is can be a difficult case, not only because we're trying to come into compliance with the city's ordinances, but also because this is a transitional area. There are residential uses adjoining this property, and there are also industrial uses very near this property. So it is not an easy case for you, but we feel that this is a request that should be approved. This is the property that we have requested to be rezoned, is the hashed area. Mr. Robertson also owns the property that is in yellow, which is not being rezoned. It remains a residential use, and it will be his personal residence for his use. So this, I wanted to just demonstrate that the entire hatched area is, again, roughly 6 acres, and his residential lot there is just under 1 acre in size. So we've done that for the purpose of helping create a buffer between this light industrial use and some of the adjoining residential uses.
Can I ask you a question? I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. I'm
Yeah.
looking at the hashtag, the hash mark, sorry. And it appears that it's kind of going down the boundary. There's a grouping of houses. Will they be landlocked? Is there a way for them to get out?
Yeah, I'm not sure why this shows Kaczynski Lane as being rezoned. I think that's, I think these folks have, it's a private access, and they do have, they've been using that access Kaczynski Lane for some time.
So they will continue to have.
That's right. Nothing we're doing is going to change their legal status on that property.
Sorry.
Yes.
So in front of the actual property, the building, what is the building in front of that to my right?
I'm sorry, which?
I see the yellow.
Yes.
Okay.
To
Right.
to your right is a single family residential.
That is single family residential. Okay.
You're
thank
talking
you.
about the first unhatched area there.
Okay. This one.
You know, his home, let me get the cursor. So the question is about this lot right here. I've got the cursor on.
Right, right.
Yeah, I think that's a single family residential.
Okay.
Property.
His home is in the yellow.
And his home is in yellow. And it's not being rezoned again. It's saying single family residential. So again, we think that this will shows a buffer between this light industrial use and the residential property next door. If I can zoom out a little bit, I'd like to show, and this may not be the easiest thing to see, but the properties being rezoned have a yellow tag on, and you'll see within a quarter mile, we have Averitt Express Trucking Logistics on the other side of Bunker Hill. We have the Amazon Fulfillment Center also on the other side of Bunker Hill. We have Old Dominion Freight Line. We have the National Pipe and Plastics Manufacturing Facility. We have Ramco Fabricators, metal fabricating. And on the east side, we have W&W AFCO Steel. And we put green markers to show that these are the industrial, some heavy industrial uses that are in the neighborhood or in the vicinity of this property. And those are just the ones that are zoned for industrial use. In addition, I put red tags on here to indicate that where staff has observed other non-residential uses being conducted on the property. And so those are, in addition to our property, the subject property in yellow with the yellow tags, we have two properties that where there has been, even though it's zoned residential, there's been non-residential uses on those properties identified. If I may then, and as an example of that, I would point, this is the property directly across the road, which you see it's a intermittent sawmill, which operates primarily on weekends, I understand it. And this shows, this is Google showing the sawmill operation that is directly across McGuire Road. Again, zone residential, but it is definitely not residential use. And now I do not say that to throw anybody under the bus. I'm just trying to make the point that this is a transitional area where people, even though it may be not allowed, it has gravitated toward light industrial uses. And again, this is 8620, which is just across the road. The staff, as you heard earlier, recommends approval of this rezoning. They concluded, and we agree, that this request is compatible with the general character of the area and also consistent with the Western Area Plan, which calls for this being future development, employment area, and prioritizing sustainability, economic development, and competitiveness. There were concerns at the zoning commission. They did not approve it, and if I can summarize the takeaway from that, and you've seen the minutes, they were concerned about a lack of limitations on light industrial use. We thought that was implicit in the request, but it was not explicit enough for the zoning commission. And they were concerned about the impact on the adjoining residential users. And then we heard those concerns, and that is why we've added these additional conditions, which I'd like to briefly go over again, just summarize. First off, the light industrial use is limited to this landscaping and horticultural services and this recycling of tree and wood. All chipping equipment will be enclosed on 3 sides. This is again to help control the sound. The chippers can be loud, and so the goal of that is to help abate the noise of the chippers. We're also limiting the hours, and though not required by the ordinance, we are proposing a planting yard across McGuire Road that will shield both the noise and the visual impact of the site. And no structure of 30 feet, and then the truck traffic will be directing to a spot that's close to Bunker Hill Road, within 450 feet of Bunker Hill Road. I'd like to point out that one of the issues that you need to confront is the benefits, and this is an improvement or a betterment for the community. There is a need for wood recycling in this community, and this, if approved, would create opportunities for employment, not only for Mr. Robertson, but for the people who would be assisting him with this project. This recycling would direct material away from growing and expensive landfills for trees and mulch. It would create mulch and chips for landscaping use and possibly for fuel. And then it creates convenient disposal for homeowners and others who need to dispose of trees and limbs. And perhaps most importantly, it helps address the problem of illegal dumping, where unscrupulous people who have trees and they have limbs, they don't want to pay the tipping fees. They don't want to have to haul all the way to Union Cross or to Summerfield to have it disposed of. And so this helps address this problem. This picture Mr. Robertson took within a couple miles of the site. So this is a request that we believe is consistent with the conditions that we've added. We would respectfully request this council to approve this request. And at this point, I would like to turn the floor over briefly to Lena Foster to talk about some of the environmental issues related to this, to the chipping process. Let's go ahead and identify yourself.
Yes, I'm Lena Foster. I reside at 5628 Baptist Assembly Road in Julian, North Carolina. I am here to discuss the environmental issues of wood chipping, and I hope that you understand about the environmental, that wood chipping, it is very good for the soil. In the soil, if you do not put your waste of your trees back into the soil, it will help the soil the water will stay in the water. Excuse me. The water will stay in the soil if you put the wood chips there. If you do not, and you would throw them on side of the road like here, it will cause a dump. The dump, people will also put wash machines. They will also put dryers. They will also put junk. And if you bring them to a place that Mr. Robertson's going to have, it will be free for the homeowners to drop, okay? It will also be good uses for children's playgrounds, because when you put the wood chips, the children will have a place to play. Okay? And they put their slides and their swings on top of this stuff, which gives them a cushion. Also, Mr. Robertson will have jobs for people who are veterans, who have disabilities, because this kind of job promotes that. And also, Mr. Robertson's wood chipping will also benefit the community. Like I said before, you won't have this dumping. You won't have washer and dryers thrown alongside this. This is what causes a dump alongside a road. So with that, I hope y'all, Madam Mayor and Councilman, approve his request.
Thank you. Any other speakers in support?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I think there may be a Vic Dillon available on.
Yes, there is. Victor Dillon?
I have one other thing to say about wood chipping. Wood chipping. You know, the chips from the wood. When you put it in the soil, there are farmers all over this community, correct? When you put it there, it composts. And your vegetables are grown here a lot. And it helps the vegetation grow. Just like I've heard in all the other statements, buffers, they require that. It holds the water in the soil. Without that, you don't have greenery. So think about that when you make your decision.
Mr. Dillon,
Yes, ma'am.
you have 3 minutes.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Vic Dillon with Dillon Tree Service here in Colfax. I live about 2 miles from where Greg is, and we take over the last year, we've taken quite a bit of wood, logs, things that we can't repurpose as lumber or we can't chip. We do chip, and he actually hauls our chips for us. But we take them there and he repurposes it, and in fact, it saves us quite amount of money. I would say around the $750 to $1,000 a week in dump fee. By the time we go to a dump, the closest dump is UCLD in Cronosville, south of Cronosville. It's about an hour round trip to him. There and back is approximately 10 minutes at best. So it benefits us and it benefits him as well. And it benefits the environment from not having to put all these logs, especially the big trees that we remove so frequently, into the dump and fill the dumps up. Anything else?
No, not if you're through. Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Winfrey, did you have
Oh,
another
yes,
speaker? You've got 2
Mr.
minutes.
Ramirez, I think would also like to speak for.
Okay, me as a neighbor, I don't have any complaint.
If you could come to the microphone.
Okay, my address is 8614. Let me make sure. Because I recently moved to this zone, so. It's 8614 McGirr Road. So as a neighbor, I live almost in front of his place, and I don't have any complaint. I cannot even notice the noise, or it's not affecting me anything. And all I can say is he's just trying to, make a living. That's what he's been doing all his life. And when I moved to the zone, the city started like giving us like trouble and all that. And to me, I cannot say nothing like, I have no complaints about what he's trying to do. I think everyone deserves like a place where to work, and I mean, I'm not against it. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
What is his address? What is your address?
It's 86, yep. It's 8614 McGirr Road, Colfax. Yep.
And just briefly, with the minute we have remaining, hearing some of the comments earlier reminded me that in the discussions earlier you had about residential development, and there's been discussion about the number of trees that are going to be removed from property that you've approved rezonings for. Those trees have to go somewhere. And this service is an option for those trees. Otherwise, these trees can end up in a landfill and not be useful. That's good. We're out of time. All right, if I'm available for any questions, if anyone has any questions for me.
Thank you. We do have 2 speakers opposed who are by Zoom. Mitch Powell and Joy Cloverdale. Are you available for comment?
I'm here.
I'm here as well.
Sorry. Okay, if one of you would start and introduce yourself.
Go ahead, Joy.
All right, hold on just a moment. Hello, my name is Joy Coverdale. I live at 8620 McGuire Road in Colfax, directly across from Mr. Robertson's residential home. That is his residential home. I'm standing on my front porch. This is the yard that he intends to use for commercial use. I'll be honest with you. I have no problems with the guy trying to make a living. But he's in a neighborhood, and well, to be perfectly honest and selfish for a moment, I would never be able to sell my home. I know that the city has this area zoned for future employment. I have called the city and talked to the people in the zoning office, and it is not their intention to buy the homes in this neighborhood, even though we have Amazon across the street and Avert Express and whatnot. Their intention is not to come to the neighborhood and buy the affected properties. So then those of us, and there's about 12 homes that surround the area, that surround Greg's property. We will have to deal with the condition of the road and the noise and the traffic. My property is the one that they said is a sawmill, but the truth is it's a hobby mill. It hasn't even run in 11 months. And we are allowed to have that according to what we've been told by the zoning folks that come by here pretty much weekly. So we're not running it as a commercial mill. We, for a while, had a more sophisticated piece of equipment. My husband had health issues. We sold it. We haven't done that in years, but that's beside the point. If Greg's property didn't, there's a little road that forks off at the top of our road. It's called Gray Wilson. And the folks that live on that road, the backs of their homes are directly against that tree line you're seeing there. So I know I've talked to some of them, and the noise is certainly a concern for them. It's certainly a concern for me. I work from home, even with the windows closed and the doors closed. It's very loud. So I just find it difficult to believe that in a neighborhood that this is something that would be acceptable.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mitch Powell?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I want to reiterate what Joy was just saying. I'm a builder. I have 5 lots on Gray Wilson, which abut to the tree line that she was speaking of there in that video. I bought this land about 5 years ago and just now have recently started marketing these properties. One of them is under contract. The buyer of that particular lot has already threatened to walk on the property if this gets rezoned. He works late in the evening, sleeps during the day, and has a kid that homeschools. I have 4 other lots there that are going to be building on. You guys talk about needing some affordable housing. This is a perfect track for that. It's in a great school district. It's in the Northwest School District. You can't buy a house in Oak Ridge or in this area for less than $400,000. I'm marketing these for around $250,000, and I'm getting a lot of calls about it. It would shut that down for me, and obviously that's going to be a financial burden on myself. I went about this the correct way, and unlike this gentleman, I watched him bring in, I don't know, hundreds of loads of dirt and do some stuff in there that they would have shut me down in a second. I don't know how that happened. I'm not here to point fingers, but I had to put into $30,000 retention ponds to develop the land that I have. And that would be a total waste if I can't sell these properties. I have one house that is going to be roofed in the next week. And it would be quite nerve-wracking to know that that customer is going to walk. I also want to talk about the noise. I don't know if you guys have ever heard chainsaws, but you can hear a chainsaw a quarter mile away from your house. this particular machine that he's talking about is 5 decibels higher than a chainsaw. If you can hear a chainsaw a quarter mile away, this thing's gonna be in your bedroom. I don't know how in the world, even with 3 walls, he's gonna have to shoot that thing out one side, load it from another side. The 3 walls are gonna have to be so far apart from each other that it's not gonna reduce any noise. The buffer that he speaks about is a joke. It's not gonna stop the noise. The traffic, he talked about the hashed out marks on that Krasinski Road. That's because they need to take their traffic down that road. So they're going to make a big loop to come in and out. I can just go on and on about why this is not a good idea. You guys talk about detriment to the neighbors, not in the public's interest. Well, I can assure you that it's a detriment to the neighbors. And whether or not it shows up the first day he tries to start this business, it's going to show up. You're going to get complaints. And I don't know how much time I got because I know Joy spoke for a little while, but if you need me to go on, I can go on.
Are there any questions for the opponents? Otherwise, we can move to the rebuttal.
I had a question for, you said, sir, the one that just spoke, you said, what, is he gone? Hello?
No, my name's Mitch.
Oh, okay. You were talking about your business and all the due diligence you had to do. Was this business there? I mean, is this place there when you, I mean?
No, let me reiterate what I had to go through. You know, your previous rezoning requests on the neighborhood about going through watersheds and different things like that when you try to develop land. Well, see, I went through the proper procedures. I purchased the land, and then I was told that I had to have the Army Corps of Engineers come out and do a survey on a little dry creek bed behind my property. I spent thousands of dollars to hire an engineer from Mount Airy, come up there and do this survey to make sure that when I cleared some trees off of my property, that I wasn't going to disturb any kind of stream buffers and things like that. Cost me a ton of money. Then they made me put in 2 retention ponds. This gentleman who also had a stream in his property, it'll show on your stream buffer maps. And you won't see him today because he's got hundreds of loads of dirt on top of it, as well as concrete retaining walls, a big load of tree debris already, and a stack of logs. All this stuff was done prematurely and before he even had permission to do any of this stuff on his property. Rules don't affect this guy. I don't know him personally. I have nothing against him, except that I don't like the way that the process has been taking place. And, you know, for somebody like me who's trying to do things properly, I bought this land because it was all residential. I developed the land because it was all residential. I took a risk, but I can tell you the industries that are around this property are quiet industries. You're talking about Amazon, trucking companies. Every one of them are in a warehouse, and there's no noise generated at all from any of those businesses. So to compare his business to some existing businesses in the area is a joke. There's no way this type of business should be put in the center of a community like we have over there.
Can I make one small comment? This is Joy Coverdale.
Mm-hmm.
That is, God forbid, I mean, Greg's not 20. God forbid something were to happen to him, or he were to move, or he were to sell. What other things could they put in there once it's rezoned? There's no telling what someone else would put in there. That is that's a major concern.
Okay, any other?
Yeah, if I've got time, I'll keep talking about recycling. You know, Dillon Tree Service needs a place closer to his business to take his debris. You know, they talk about logs and limbs on the side of the road. There's a Kernersville recycling place it might be 30 minutes, like he said, round trip for him in a truck. But a residential person, homeowner, who can pick up a log like they showed pictures of on the side of the road, that kind of cracked me up a little bit too. That they can take that stuff to Kernersville if they want to. There's also a city collection of limbs. So you've got ways to get rid of your debris. They're not going to be, the residential customer is not going to be bringing very much to this gentleman. It's going to be mostly commercial guys that are in his business that are looking for a way to save $1. And it's going to just feed him all the material he needs to make his money. And I don't have nothing against people making money. Trust me, there's a place for this business somewhere, but it doesn't need to be in the middle of a development. We were looking at the red dots about the non-conforming residentials right there on the same road as him. I don't know how many family members or friends he has that lives in this area. I know there's a few, and I don't know what kind of businesses they're supposedly running on their property. But if you got a sawmill or you've got a tree service, and this guy's a chipping business, of course they're going to want. They're in collaboration. They're all going to want to be there together so they can run this massive operation. But it doesn't stop the noise. It doesn't stop the traffic, and it doesn't stop it from being unsightly. And all those reasons alone are enough to deny this request.
Any questions? All right, then we'll move to the 5-minute rebuttal period for the applicant.
Thank you. I would just make a couple of quick responses. First off, I would say the question Ms. Coverdale had about the uses that will be allowed, the conditions that we've asked you to approve limit this light industrial zoning to horticultural services, including the recycling of wood and limbs. And so I think that is adequately addressed in the conditions that we have placed on the rezoning. With regard to, and we understand that it's difficult when you have the transitional areas of light industrial and industrial uses right next to residential properties. But we think that we have added conditions that will address the noise and that will address the development standards that need to be applied. I know Mr. Robertson is working on getting a detention pond approved, and he will have to go through, as you heard earlier, he'll have to go through the permitting process to make sure that it happens. His improvements will have to comply with your ordinances. The TRC will have to approve those. And the buffers will have to be up to city standards. So regardless of what may be there now, non-complying, moving forward, he understands that he's going to have to comply with the city's development ordinances to the letter and comply with all the conditions that he's put forward. So yes, we understand. Ideally, this would have happened 3 years ago before this use started on this property. I would also suggest, though, that the fact that it operated for 3 years and without at least 2.5 years without any complaint, I think undermines, the argument that is a noxious use. In other words, if these opponents, if it had been such a problem, why didn't we hear about it 2.5 years ago? But that is not the case. So the point I'm trying to make is, I don't think it is, we have offered conditions that we think will address the concerns of the people who have spoken tonight. And we think that we have tried to be good neighbors with the other people on McGuire Road that could be affected by this property. Thank you. Oh, yes.
Winfrey.
Yes.
Quick question for you. Just to clarify, so we're saying that Mr. Robertson, was this an ongoing concern when he moved to the property and he just continued it, or did he start that business when he?
I believe, and he's had it for some time. I think he may have inherited a portion of this property. So, and so I think the operation existed, but he started the operation roughly 3 years ago. But he's had the property for much longer than 3 years.
So he's owned the property for longer, but the actual operation of the wood chipping business began some 3 years ago.
We think 3 years ago, yes, sir.
And when it comes to the conditions that we are looking at or we vote on tonight. Just kind of remind me, which ones of those are different from what was heard at the Planning and Zoning Commission? What were the differences? If you could highlight that for me.
Yeah, so we did not explicitly limit, for example, the first condition was limiting to landscaping and horticultural services. That was not in that initial condition. The enclosing of the chipping equipment on three sides to ameliorate the noise, that was not on the condition. The hours of operation were there. The type T planning yard was not a condition that was in the initial rezoning request. And I think those are the three. The other three conditions that were there at the zoning commission.
Sending them down to you now.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Outland?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me correct one thing. I forgot. At the zoning commission, the height was 40 feet and we had no reason to, so we've lowered that to 30 feet instead of 40 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Then Mrs. Hightower.
Yeah, Mr. Winfrey, as I said in connection with the prior rezoning, for me, zoning decisions are about the highest and best use of the land, not necessarily the applicant. That being said, I will be very clear. I don't think it's something that inures to an applicant's credit to engage in an unpermitted use. And so while I'll focus my analysis on the land use, it's certainly not a plus in favor of an application that an unpermitted use has been engaged in and continuing. And candidly, if it were something that I could legally consider to deny an application, I would likely consider that against an application, but the law is the law and therefore I won't. So sticking and focusing on the actual land use, when you look at your application in the general vicinity, there are lots of different uses. That's generally the case in every city, depending on what you consider to be the general vicinity. In the immediate vicinity, it's all residential. And so I'd be interested in hearing from you, the applicant, about why is that not problematic to have a non-residential use in the center of residential uses all the way around it on every side?
Yes, well, it is true that all the adjoining properties are residential uses, are zoned for residential uses, I'll put it that way. But I'll say 600 feet away on the other side of Bunker Hill, we have light industrial uses. So yes, this is, but I will concede to your point, yes, it is completely surrounded by residential uses, but 600 feet away, we do have industrial uses. If that's helpful.
Mrs. Hightower?
So, Mr. Winfrey, as I was reading the zoning minutes from the zoning commission meeting, one question that was asked that nobody could speak to, but it is a concern to me. Not only chipping, but would there be burning? And is that a possibility? Now, you all didn't speak to that, and I think, but I would be curious to know, because again, if your wood chipper machine broke, or if you couldn't put a piece of wood in the chipper, would you burn it? I mean, so that would be a concern as well, and it wasn't addressed in the zoning minutes, however, as I read it here, but
well, and
that's a concern too, being it right smack in a residential area around homes. And burning is not something we do in the city.
yes, thank you for that question, Ms. Hightower. We'd actually had offered to put in there a condition of no burning of wood on the property, but the planning staff was of the opinion that because it wasn't allowed anyway in the city, that was not a zoning issue. That was more of a, if not law enforcement, just regular enforcement provision. So we had agreed there should be no burning on the property. And we had offered that as a condition, but the planning staff was of the opinion that should not be included because it was already disallowed anyway.
Well, I appreciate that thought, but the fact that you've been running an illegal business anyway under zoning would say that you might would have needed that to be a condition of your request, because just because it says you can't do it doesn't mean it ain't gonna be done, because stuff has already happened for 2.5, 3 years, it shouldn't have been done either.
Right. Well, I understand. And yes, we would, we, like I said, we offered that as a condition and that was not something the staff wanted us to pursue.
Yeah.
One more quick,
5-minute rebuttal, Mr. Holston.
just one more quick question for Mr. Winfrey.
Yes.
So if this zoning application is approved, how many wood chippers could you have on the property?
2%. I do not know the answer to that. I think as a practical matter, given the constraints of the topography and how the flow of traffic, I think one would be.
But you're not limited.
But I'm not limiting myself to that. But I'm thinking this constraints the property would probably limit us to one.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we now have a 5-minute rebuttal for those in opposition if they wish to exercise it.
Yeah, I would if I could. You talk about being in operation for 2.5 to 3 years. Now, maybe you can say, but during the 2.5 to 3 year process that they've been getting all of this prepared, they haven't been chipping, or I guarantee you would have heard some complaints. What's been going on is they're getting their grading work done, their retaining walls built, their stack of logs in place. They haven't started chipping. If they start that chipper up, everybody in the neighborhood is going to give you guys a call. And so I just want you to realize that. And the second thing is that, when they bring this truckloads of stuff into this place, what's going to keep the mud from entering the street as they exit? Because there are no paved roads on this property. There is no plan that I've seen that shows a truck entering the property, how it would be unloaded, how it would get off the property without driving over the dirt that's there now. Obviously, they're going to have wood chips galore. I guess that's what they're going to tell you, is they could just throw mulch out everywhere. But, I just don't think that a business like this, and I'm glad you made the point about the number of chippers, because if one chipper is 5 decibels higher than a chainsaw, can you imagine 3 or 4 of them out there nonstop, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and you live right beside of it? I mean, there's no peace in the neighborhood. You walk outside on your deck, you want to grill out, and all you hear is, rah. It would drive you insane. Surely you guys would understand this. Imagine that if it was your neighborhood. Anyway, that's all I got to say.
Thank you. Ms. Cloverdale, did you want to say anything, or can we close the public hearing?
I believe that Mr. Powell has said everything necessary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move
Can I
to
have a
close the
motion?
public hearing.
Second.
Second, moved by Mrs. Thurm, seconded by Mr. Boozawaiter. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Public hearing is closed. Do I have comments or a motion? Mrs. Thurm?
Having spent 13 years of my career in the wood industry, I am very familiar with wood chipping and the noise that's made, and what this is and what this would be in full force in the middle of a residential neighborhood. For that reason, I'd like to move that this zoning request be denied.
Second.
Okay, so that was moved by Mrs. Thurm and seconded by Mrs. Hoffman. So we are voting on the first item. Sorry. Council, please vote. This still requires a statement of consistency, so.
I have that.
Mrs.
Is
Thurm,
our
if you would
vote a
read it,
no
please.
or yes to deny?
Even on a no.
It's
Yes.
yes to deny.
Inconsistency.
No, I'm saying yes to deny, right?
Yes to deny.
Yes to
But-
deny.
But Mrs. Thurm needs to read her statement.
I just need to.
Zoning amendment statement by city council on consistency with adopted comprehensive plan and reasonableness. The Greensboro City Council believes that its action to deny the zoning request for the property described as a portion of 8625 McGuire Road, 8627, 8629 McGuire Road, and 210 Krasinski Lane from R3 Residential Single Family 3 to CDLI Conditional District Light Industrial to be inconsistent with the adopted GSO 2040 Comprehensive Plan, and considers the action taken to be reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The request is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan's future belt form map and future land use map. The proposed CDLI zoning district as conditioned does not limit negative impacts on the adjacent properties, nor does it permit uses which also fit the context of the surrounding area. The request is not reasonable due to the size, physical conditions, and other attributes of the area. It will be a detriment to the neighbors and surrounding community, and denial is in public interest.
Okay, council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'm a yes. Was Busewader?
Yes.
Mr. Outland?
Yes.
Mrs. Stern?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hightower?
Yes.
And the motion to deny carries 9-0. We do need to take a break, but I want to take item I.1 first, because I know that there are family members here, I believe. Item number I.1 is a resolution to authorize the renaming of a portion of Bragg Street between Martin Luther King Jr. Drive and South Elm Street to Carolyn Coleman Way in the city of Greensboro to honor former Guilford County Commissioner Carolyn Coleman. Mrs. Hightower?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the last council meeting, I asked staff to start the process for the renaming of the street from East Bragg, on East Bragg from South Elm to Martin Luther King Drive. And they are doing that now with the reading of the resolution. The processes will begin to do their due diligence as to making sure all things are handled in the proper manner. So I would like to read this and preface it by saying that I've talked to the church, Reverend Wright. They are excited about this. They look forward to this being done as well. The street has no residents on it, just one business. But I thought the naming of Carolyn Coleman Way, because she always did it her way, was very, I think, very nice to do for her as well. And her family is here, I believe, tonight to hear this reading of the resolution. So after I read the resolution, then I will ask staff to make sure that we do this and have it done by July 1st. Her birthday's in July as well. So I think that was all appropriate. Whereas Carolyn Coleman was a resident of Guilford County and served as an elected official for over 20 years as a Guilford County Commissioner for East Greensboro, Pleasant Gardens District 7. Whereas the Greensboro City Council honored former Commissioner Coleman with the adoption of resolution number 102-22 on April 5, 2022. Whereas former Commissioner Coleman served a host of Guilford County and City of Greensboro boards and commissions and made history as the first African-American woman to serve as chair of the Guilford County Board of Commissioners. Whereas as a devout congregant of the New Zion Baptist Church, Missionary Baptist Church, I think, it is requested that the Greensboro City Council approve the Greensboro Department of Transportation, approve the Greensboro, I think this is the one that's not quite right, that the Greensboro City Council approve GDOT to rename a portion of Bragg Street from Martin Luther King Jr. Drive to South Elm Street in the city of Greensboro to Carolyn Coleman Way. And now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Greensboro that a portion of East Bragg Street from Martin Luther King Jr. Drive to South Elm Street in the city of Greensboro be renamed Carolyn Coleman Way, adopted this the 19th day of April, 2022.
Move the resolution.
So that is moved by Mrs. Hightower.
Second.
And
Second.
seconded by Mayor Pro Tem, along with everybody else on council.
Goldie.
Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Holston?
Absolutely. Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Mrs. Abuzawader?
Yes.
Mr. Outling?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hightower?
Absolutely, as Commissioner Holman, Councilmember Holston said, absolutely, but I think this is so appropriate. I think someone from her family is here.
Yes.
If they wanted to
Would you
say,
like to come up and get
you
the
want-
resolution?
come up and.
We wish we could just give you the street right now, but it's coming.
It is.
And we will have a little ceremony once the staff does everything and gets it prepared. I
look forward
think
to that.
it will be appropriate. So, yeah, you can just, I'll get it to you.
Okay, hello everyone. First of all, I'd like to give honor to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ because without him, none of us would be here. Secondly, I would like to thank the whole council, especially Mrs. Hightower, for actually getting this done. And like you said, I do find it very appropriate to name it Carolyn Coleman Way because we didn't know, but she always was gonna get her way regardless. And I do thank you all because this is immortal, because long after all of us are gone, it'll still be there. So I cannot thank you enough. And that's all I can say.
So we will now take a 10-minute break, and it's going to be a hard 10-minute break. I'm going to start whether or not you're here because I have tickets to Elton John. So we need to move the show on. 10 minutes.
What time did the show start?
10 minutes ago.
I'm going to answer to you.
I know.
Where could they keep the machines from making noise? How can they keep the machines from making noise? And you know, just like he said, a chainsaw, you can hear all over the neighborhood.
My buddy was mad at me.
No, I wasn't.
She said, I looked down here
I
and
was
see you
trying.
roll your eyes.
I did roll my eye. I did.
I knew what you were doing. Can you I knew what you were doing down here.
I said, I'm gonna go. I could go and go with that.
We decided to come back.
I have
Yeah,
this,
I started to say it.
I appreciate this.
Last week. But tonight I got a few things I want to talk about. And I'm trying to think about
You can talk if you want. Exactly. I'll watch the tape. Yes, sir. I want to thank you all for coming back very quickly. I appreciate it. I got a whole bunch of pictures of what's going on at the Greensboro Coliseum, and it is rocking and rolling.
Is he singing yet?
Yes, he has started.
Oh, he started.
Why don't you let me do the rest of it?
Because these are some important
All
ones,
right.
but thank you. So item I.2 is a resolution authorizing change order number 5 in the amount of $400,000 for contract 2009-056 EL 5101 DJ for the Murrow Boulevard roadway improvement and downtown Greenway Phase 2 project with Yates Construction Company.
Move the item.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Abuzawader, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman? Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mayor Pro
Yes.
Tem, I am a yes. Ms. Abuzawader?
Yes.
Mr. Outling?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hightower?
No,
No? Okay. that
absolutely
passes.
not. No MWBE stuff. I can't go with it.
That passes 8-1. Item number I3 and 4, a resolution authorizing change order number 2 in the amount of $36,000 for contract 2013-0900 EL 5101 DL parts C and D for the Pisgah Church Road, Lee's Chapel Road, and Yanceville Street Sidewalk Improvement Project with Atlantic Contracting Company. And I.4, resolution authorizing a change order in the amount of $125,000 for contract 2015-036 U 5532A for the South Josephine Boyd Street roadway and sidewalk improvement project with Atlantic Contracting Company.
Move the item.
Second.
So moved by Dr. Wells, seconded by Ms. Abuzawader. This is for I.3. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson? I am a yes. Mrs. Abuzawader?
Yes.
Mr. Outling?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hightower?
Yes.
And that passes 9-0. Can I have a motion on I.4?
Move the item.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Thurm, seconded by Mrs. Abuzawader. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson, I'm a yes. Ms. Abuzawader?
Yes.
Mr. Outling?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hightower?
No,
No?
no, 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 no.
That passes.
No MBEs.
8-1. Items number I.5 through I.9 will be taken together. I.5 is a resolution approving a contract in the amount of $860,000 with HDR Engineering of the Carolinas for contract administration and construction advisory support services, Liberty Elevated Water Tank Design Build Project for the Greensboro Randolph County Mega Site. Item 1.6, resolution to approve Phase 1 Design Build Series for the Greensboro Randolph County Mega Site Project, which includes the Liberty Elevated Water Tank in the amount of $1,827,140 with Landmark Structures, LL. Item I.7, ordinance to amend Water Resources Capital Project Revenue Bond Fund Project to establish funding for the Liberty Elevated Water Tank construction Greensboro Randolph County Mega Site Project Phase 1 in the amount of $2,681,200. And I.8, a resolution approving bid in the amount of $21,564,873.61 and authorizing execution of contract with Jimmy R. Lynch and Sons, Inc. for the Liberty Road Water and Sewer Improvements Phase 3 project. And item 1.9, ordinance to amend the Water Resources Capital Project Revenue Bond Fund project for establishing funding for the Liberty Water and Sewer Construction Greensboro Randolph County Mega Site Project in the amount of $21,564,875.
Move the items.
And Madam Mayor, I respectfully ask to be recused from these items. All of them relate to the Greensboro Randolph Mega Site in Randolph County. The law firm at which I'm a partner, Brooks Pierce, advises the Greensboro Randolph Mega Site Foundation on ongoing matters.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Holston, seconded by Dr. Wells. Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson?
Absolutely not. Yes.
I am a yes. Mrs. Abusawader?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hightower?
And this is to recuse?
Yes.
Yes.
This passes 8-0. So we will take I.5 first.
Move the item.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Abusawader, seconded by Dr. Wells. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson? I am a yes. Mrs. Abusawader?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hightower?
No.
Item 1.6. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Wells, seconded by
Second.
Mrs. Thurm. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman? Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson? I am a yes. Mrs. Abusawader?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hightower?
Yes.
And that passes 8-0.
Is the screen?
Oh.
Now we are on
not working.
I.7. Moved by
Second.
Mrs. Hoffman, seconded by Ms. Abusawader. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mayor Pro
Yes.
Tem? I am a yes. Ms. Abusawader?
Yes.
Mr. Outling? Oh, I'm sorry. Mrs. Thurm
Yes.
and Mrs. Hightower.
Okay. Yes.
That passes 8-0. Now, item I.8. Moved by Mrs.
Second.
Hoffman, seconded by Ms. Abusawader. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem? I am a yes. Ms. Abusawader?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hightower?
I'm a no, and let me tell you why I'm a no. I'm a big no, because I have some concerns around the good faith efforts piece of this. This had a goal for MBEs of 15%. They achieved 0.6%. And if we got to stop this. We got to get this good faith effort piece. They're using the good faith efforts. They're not doing them. They're just adding up the points. They're getting the points, but they're not putting profit good faith efforts. And if you got a goal of 15% and you only achieve 0.6 on MBE, that tells you they didn't do it. So I can't support that. I'm sorry it's at the mega site, but I can't support that. Because if you can't do it on the front end, I'm losing confidence that people are gonna get jobs. And we gotta get jobs now, just like we gotta get them in the future on this plan. I can't support this. And
So
this,
that passes
I
7 to
understand what you're saying, Sharon, but I understand on another contract that's coming is done more than what.
Not on this agenda.
Not
but-
on this one, but I'm wondering, how do you judge whether one has done the best that they can do and really looking for in particular areas especially.
There are measures to do good faith as efforts. You have efforts. If you look in the disparity study plan and section 8 talks about good faith efforts that have to be put forth. Yes, there are certain things you do to show good faith, but there are things you can do that make you add up to the 50 points, but you don't put any effort into it. See, I can pick up the phone and call one person, get some plans. There are things like that. The good faith effort process has to change. And Griffin and Strong said that in the disparity study. And we got to do that. So I'm
Thank you.
sorry. And let me just say this, when there's a goal set on a project, it's not because it's a dream goal. It's set for a reason. It's set because there's availability in the trades that are on that contract. So that's the other thing. And I think there's a misconception of, well, it's a goal, but we couldn't find anybody. And that's not the case. And so on this instance, this project to me is too huge for us not to have good participation on it. People all across are wanting to be a part of this. And I think it's too critically important that we just allow it to go unnoticed. So I can't support this item. Thank you.
And Councilwoman Hightower, I would say that I supported this, but I also have some concerns about, the 15% goal and the 0.16 MDE. And I think that means simply that we need to dig in and just make sure that the program is working the way it should be working and hold all those accountable who are working the program.
Well, I agree, but it needs to be more than just a program. And I know city manager and I aren't right there yet, but this department, MWB is not a department, but it should be a department because it aligns with priorities that we have. Priorities of eradicating poverty and addressing homelessness and economic development and living wages. So I think it has to be its own department so that people recognize the priorities that are associated with this. As long as this is a program can be discontinued at any time, any moment. And we've done 4 other disparity studies and the numbers haven't moved the way they ought to be moving. And we have to do a better job. I know you want to go to Elton John, but I'm sorry. This particular item, I am very disturbed by because there are some underlying things that have gone on. And we won't talk about them, but there are some underlying things in this regard. And at some point in time, we got to have a principle that we stand by. So.
Sharon, I agree. I share some of your concerns. I do know that we have a work session coming up with Griffin and Strong, and I think that these are good things that we can talk about with them. I will say that Water Resources has always done a really good job of supporting MWBE. So, I understand the problems with this contract, but I know that Water Resources and other departments, but Water Resources has done a really good job making sure that they have MWBE participation on most contracts. I feel your concerns and I look forward to the work session.
Yeah, well, we will be in Wilmington, myself, Hugh, and Yvonne on the 28th, but I will have reserved 2 hours to be on the work session. But it's the first work session, not the last, because the new disparity studies come out. And if the numbers are found again, y'all, we have not had any success. We can't pat ourselves on the back until we can see the numbers move in a tremendous way. And 3%, 4%, that's nothing to be proud of. In a city that's 52% Black and brown, we got to do a better job. And we have to say that out loud to the people that want to do this work, that we love to have them do the work, but they got to respect our citizens and people in our MSA area. So I'll leave it at that.
So that does pass 7-1. I'm assuming that you will say ditto on I.9. I do need a motion for I.9. Moved by Dr. Wells, seconded by Mr. Holston. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman? Yes. Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem? Mrs. Boozawaiter?
Yes.
Mrs. Sturm?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hightower?
No.
And that passes 7-1. Item number I.10 is a resolution authorizing contract between GPD and GCBE, the Guilford County Board of Education, for school resource officers in the amount of $1,573,491.
Move the item.
Move the item.
Moved by Mr. Holston, seconded by Ms. Abuzawader. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Holston,
Yes.
Dr. Wells.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Mrs. Abuzawader.
Yes.
Mr. Outling,
Yes.
Mrs. Stern,
Yes.
Mrs. Hightower,
Yes.
and that passes 9-0. Item I.11 is an ordinance to establish a grant fund to house federal earmark funds for CAD system upgrade in the amount of $3 million.
Move the item.
Moved by Ms. Abuzawader, seconded by Dr. Wells. Council, please vote. And I believe that this funding is the result of work from our legislators, specifically Congresswoman Manning, who helped get this through. So thank you to her for that. And Mrs. Hoffman, Mr. Holston,
Yes.
Dr. Wells.
Yes.
I am a yes. Mrs. Abuzawader.
Yes.
Mr. Outling,
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm,
Yes.
and Mrs. Hightower.
Yes.
And that passes 9-0. Ordinance, item I.1, ordinance in the amount of $12 million, amending the Performing Arts
Move the item.
Fund.
Second.
So moved by Mrs. Johnson, moved by and seconded by Ms. Abuzawader. I do want to say that this is really good news
It's
because
very good
the
news.
Performing Arts Center is making more money than we thought they would.
Yep.
And I know that some people read this, nobody here on council, but I've been contacted by people who read the agenda and were afraid that we were giving an additional $12 million to Tanger Center to help it out for its losses, and had to explain that it was actually really, really good news. So Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Happy
Mayor Pro Tem?
yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Abuzawader? Mr. Outling?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hightower?
Yes.
And that passes 9-0. Item number I.13 is a resolution calling for a bond referendum that is basically updating previous action that we've taken to reflect the newer dates.
Move the item.
Moved by Mrs. Hightower, seconded by Ms. Abuzawader. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Holston,
Yes.
Dr. Wells,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem, I am a yes. Ms. Abuzawader, Mr. Outling,
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm,
Yes.
Mrs. Hightower.
Yes.
And that passes 9-0. Item number I.14 is a resolution making certain findings and determinations authorizing the filing of an application with the local government commission, requesting the local government commission to sell bonds at a private sale, and approving the financing team in connection with the issuance of revenue bonds by the city.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Hoffman. Is
Second.
that- And seconded by
Me.
Mrs. Hightower. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman, Mr. Holston,
Yes.
Dr. Wells. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Abuzawader.
Yes.
Mr. Outling,
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm,
Yes.
Mrs. Hightower.
Yes.
And that passes 9-0. Item number I.5 is an ordinance amending fiscal year 2021, 2022 general fund and general capital improvement fund in the amount of $1,159,000 for police security improvements.
Move
This
the
money,
item. I'm sorry.
moved by Mr. Holston, seconded by Ms. Abuzawader. This money is coming out of our ARP funds, and we discussed it at our work session. I think we discussed it last week. I think it's important that we move on the security fencing. We did talk about employee bonuses. I believe that will be on our next agenda. So we have a motion and a second. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman? Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'm a yes. Ms. Abuzawader? Mr. Outling?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hightower.
Yes.
And that passes 9-0. We are now going to move on to board and commissions list, but I'm going to turn that over to Mayor Pro Tem. I can watch the rest of the meeting tomorrow on video. What? Oh, there was an addendum. Thank you. And was it the earmark fund? So this is just a resolution in support of the City of Greensboro 23 congressional earmark project submittals. We have all gotten emails on what we submitted, and I know that there were many community projects as well. So if I could have a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Thurm, seconded by Mrs. Buzawader. Council, please vote. Mrs. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Dr. Wells?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
I am a yes. Mrs. Buzawader?
Yes.
Mr. Outling?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurm?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hightower?
Yes,
That passes 9-0. I have to say, we should have concerts in town more often. We really ripped through this second half. I appreciate you working with me, and I am going to ask to be excused from the rest of the meetings.
Adios.
no, do I have to vote? No.
Yeah, I think we all vote. Do we? Do I have to get a vote on that? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously.
Get on out of here.
I am headed out. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Bring us a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Boards and commissions, Ms. Hoffman? Mr. Holston?
None tonight.
None. Mr. Buzawader? Justin?
None.
Tammy?
I have none.
You better not have any.
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
I would like to appoint Musa Isafu to the minimum housing, who he replaces the one I removed 2 weeks ago, Mr. Colson. And Issa, by the way, used to serve on our human rights. And so he's excited to be able to serve again. So,
Okay,
Second.
thank you.
okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. That's all I have.
Angie, we don't have to vote. If we all say aye, that was it. Anything else, Sharon?
No,
Okay.
no more appointments at tonight.
All right, then let's go to the next thing. Resolution in support of City of Greensboro's fiscal year 23 congressional earmark. We did that.
No, we did that.
That was the special one we did, yes. Okay,
The mayor did it.
matters to be discussed by council and the mayor, okay. Sharon?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. The last time we had our council meeting on April 5th, I really didn't have much to say. And so some of my constituents, that kind of concerned them. So they were like, now what you mean? So tonight I got a whole lot to say. No, we'll be here a minute. No, I'm just kidding.
You got 5 minutes.
Seriously, in all seriousness, I do want to bring up, and I know the city manager or the deputy city manager are not here tonight, and so they're out, but I would like to, Mr. Davis is here, circle back to, a couple weeks ago, we had this, y'all voted, and I did vote with you to give 500,000 to demolish houses, but the caveat for me was there had to be a plan. Well, that's not been done. So I'm either gonna take my vote back and vote no, or I need to see a plan. I need to know how we're thinking along those lines. Knocking them down is important because there's some that just absolutely do need to be knocked down. But if they can be saved and somebody comes along and wants to save it, the property owner, fine. But I think right now, without having any kind of plan, I'm very troubled by this. Some of them I know need to go tomorrow. Could probably just take a good wind would probably knock them over, and that's okay. If that happens and that need to be happening, we do need to stabilize our neighborhoods though. So I'd like to hear and have some ideas of what that's gonna be. It's gone silent since we voted on, it's total silence since that time. Yes, one house has been knocked down, but I saw an agenda at minimum housing, and the only thing on the minimum housing agenda was demolish, 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 demolish. All the other violations were just, if there were any, were not on the agenda. So I think we really need to vet that appropriately. So if you.
Councilwoman Hightower, I think I sent you all just a quick snapshot of the demolition list, but I think what you're asking for is a more detailed explanation of how we're going through that process and approaches. One of the things we intend to do from neighborhood development is disseminate something each week. So I think what you're looking for is something a little bit more detailed than just a list. And so we can provide that for you.
Yeah. It's gonna take more than just a list. I get that, and that's fine. I understand what we have to do, but I think we just have to couple it with a plan, at least some plan in place of sort. So we gotta have some, housing is needed. We just saw what we did tonight. So obviously, if we're knocking them down, we need to find a way and have a plan to replace those, because that's critically important too. Just knocking them down, putting pockets of holes in the community is not the way to stabilize and revitalize neighborhoods, particularly because most of these houses in districts 1 and 2. So if you could get me that, I would greatly, but let's have a conversation. I would appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I would like to also say this past weekend, everybody was Easter egg hunting, and which was great. A lot of bunnies. I saw a lot of bunnies out. There was a wonderful Easter egg hunt in Willow Oaks this past weekend. Cottage Grove Collaborative, about 4 neighborhoods came together, and they had well over 200 some people down out there where the kids had eggs, Kona ice. The eco bus is out again. I saw a cockroach in a box that I couldn't step on, unfortunately, but I guess an animal. So it's very interesting. They're out, and I think that's a great asset to come to a community event. The kids absolutely love seeing the snakes and stuff in the box, but it was a very good community event. Mayor came, Mr. Holston came, I believe. Commissioner Jones, Frankie Jones came as well. And even the sheriff came, and kids all love that, taking pictures. So we have to do more events like that as we come out of COVID. So thank you.
That was it? No.
Well, let me see now. Yes, ma'am.
Mr.
Yes, I have the rest of Councilwoman Hightower's list over here. Just a couple of things. One, several things actually. As you know, I'm the liaison to the War Memorial Commission. We had a great meeting. It's just great to hear that the War Memorial Commission is back in business, just all the activities. If I said, between Tanger and the Greensboro Coliseum, we talked about Hamilton and Charlie Wilson and New Edition, Eric Church, who had the 9th largest event in the Coliseum, Jeezy and K. Michelle coming into the Tanger Center, Elton John tonight, the Globetrotters, Paul McCartney over at the Lawrence Stroll. It's just, we are really back in business and doing things on a concurrent basis. So it's not just a onesie twosie, but very oftentimes when the Greensboro Coliseum has 2 and 3 events going on at one time. So we're really back in business. Really excited to see that. Next is, we had sponsored by the Parks and Recreations Department, Heath Park had a celebration opening up of the new playground equipment and also the walking loop, sponsored by the Parks and Rec and Build Greensboro Together and the Crescent Rotary, who was kind enough to provide the funding for it. And there are many of us were there from council. It's just probably too many to name, but it was it was a fantastic event and a great public-private partnership to help the community and the kids in the neighborhoods and to rebuild Heath Park, especially after the impact of the tornadoes back in 2018. Next is, Councilwoman Hightower talked about this past weekend, and thank you for the invitation to Cottage Grove. That was a great event, great activity, the kids, the families, and the like. I also had the opportunity to go downtown. There was a car show sponsored by Adrian Velasquez and the Low Key AF group. It had over 200 cars there. It was a great crowd. It was great to see the social district in effect. Folks having a good time, looking at the cars, enjoying the beverage. The weather was wonderful. That was a great activity. And also to help promote small business, I had the opportunity to tour one of our newer small businesses, the Selfie Shop, Antonina and met a new friend. Met a new TikTok friend who taught me a couple of TikTok dances. It was just an awesome. It was just an awesome activity. It was great to support small business, great to support the community. Engagement was strong, and I don't think it really could have been any better. And I believe, in the sake of time, I'll say that that's it for me. Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
You're welcome. Justin?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. First, want to congratulate Police Chief Brian James on his forthcoming retirement. Chief James has obviously led the police department in a really challenging period, whether it's the pandemic, so many things happening in our community. So obviously, we all wish him the best of luck on what he has in store for his retirement. And I've had a real pleasure for many years, not so much the past year during COVID, but for years before then. Chief James is a avid Greensboro Swarm G League basketball fan. And so I've had the pleasure of sitting beside Chief James for a number of Swarm games. And so it's been a pleasure getting to know him and obviously wish him the best in his future endeavors. Consistent with some of the other remarks, I will reiterate my request for a work session on violent crime specifically. The past several weeks have been a really distinct challenge in our community, including shootings on I-40, as well as a number of other things. Obviously, aggravated assaults with firearms up some 40+% year over year. And so I respectfully reiterate that request specifically on violent crime, not public safety generally, as a real issue is violent crime. And so again, congratulations to Chief James on his retirement, and look forward to hopefully having a work session on violent crime specifically.
Dr. Wells?
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I attended on Tuesday, I attended a day-long session at the Triad North Carolina Leadership Forum 2022, and we dealt with housing in the Piedmont. It was quite interesting, and I hope to bring some of the ideas back to the council. On last Thursday, I read to Mr. Sharp's class, 4th grade class at Rankin School. They had Rankin Reads. That was all day over there. And of course, we had the pleasure of going on Thursday to hear President Biden over at A&T, which was interesting. Now, last Saturday, there was an Easter egg hunt in Woodmere Park that was sponsored by Creative Zone, and a young lady named Amber McQueen just sponsored her group, and the kids enjoyed it. They had lots of fun, food and toys and prizes for the kids. This Saturday, we had a big discussion tonight about Reedy Fork, but on Saturday, I'd like to meet the Reedy Fork community. I'll be at the clubhouse at 4:30 for a talk at Reedy Fork. And on Sunday at 3 at Bethel AME, there will be a memorial service for Katie Dorsett, the person for whom this chamber was named. So if you can attend, it would be nice. Her daughter is extending an invitation to us. Thank you.
So Lucy Waiter, we have so happy to have you back.
Oh, listen, it is good to be back. I want to reiterate, I know I was on the Zoom call last meeting, but it's really much better to be here in person. So thank you all, and thank you for the phone calls, texts, emails. I mean, I'm overwhelmed with all the support I've received, and just very glad to not only be alive, but to be back to where I can start going a few places here and there. So thank you all so much for your thoughts, prayers, and help supporting me in this challenge. But as I said, the doctors have given me 100% recovery rate, and I am almost 5 weeks ahead of where I should be right now. So this is just amazing, amazing.
Always fast.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm fast. Thank you, overachiever, or whatever you want to call me. I did want to congratulate Chief Brian James on his retirement. I am heartbroken though. I'm heartbroken for this city because Chief James has made outreach into all communities in our city. We all know that there are separate communities and neighborhoods in this city, and he has made a tremendous effort to reach out to every single community. And he has helped build those relationships in those communities with the police department. I mean, he goes on the neighborhood walks. I don't know how we're going to replace this man. He brought the youth initiative, the summer jobs programs, when other people talk about it for years and years, but never do anything about it. But, you know, Mr. Davis, and you can let Mr. City Manager know when he returns, I would really like for us to have a few minutes at a work session to see why, when we have the most perfect people in positions, that they either decide to go ahead and retire or they get another position someplace else, and they haven't been in that position very long. I know what I hear through the grapevine, and not a one of the people who have left or who are retiring will ever say it. But I hear from through the grapevine that it's because some people on council micromanage. And I really think we need to address that. I know a couple of years ago, Mr. Wilson sent out a memo that if we had a concern, if something was going on, we were to contact one of the assistant city managers and they would put us in touch with the department head or someone else. You know, for instance, the chief is not our employee to be berated or yelled at or said that his initiatives are no good. That the city manager is his boss. Only the city manager. Our two employees are the city manager and the city attorney. So I really would like for us, if Mr. Jaiwoba would, at a work session sometime in the near future, we really need to sit down and talk about this. Because I can tell you in the last 2 years, we've lost 3 to 4 good department heads who were good people who would help carry this city through to the next level. And I just really, really think we need to discuss this. So thank you very much.
Well, my best to Chief James. Chief James grew up in my neighborhood with my children. So I knew him when he was a boy. It's a fine young man, a fine chief. We're going to miss him. I wish him the best. I want him to get some rest and have some fun, but I really am going to miss him. I was the MC for a teen talent show at Barber Park a week ago. Eta Phi Beta sponsored it, and we had some very good talent there. And so I was glad to do that. And May 2nd, who went to Rankin School and read? I'm going May 2nd to Rankin School. So it's always great to be able to get out and to do things with young people. All right, what both of you assistant managers want to say a word?
Nothing but good evening. Thank you.
How about you, Mr. Attorney?
I'll follow his lead. Good evening.
Can I get a witness up in here? I need.
Can you get a witness for what?
A journey.
Why are we adjourning? Where we go?
Leave you here.
Why we go? I do have one other thing for Mr. Davis. I would like to know what is the deal with Blind Tiger, because that's something that's troubling to me. And the fact that we went after other clubs and after one incident or so, where are we with that? Because as you all talk about stuff in the city, when stuff like this happens, that needs to be addressed. So I'd like to really know what we're going to do with that situation and how we're going to handle it.
I sent you all an initial email yesterday afternoon, which kind of detailed where we are preliminarily. Of course, just to kind of recount, GPD is doing the criminal investigation. The other components that make up the safety review board, to include code enforcement, the fire marshal's office, engineering and inspection, all went out to conduct an inspection of the location. As I outlined in the message, due to multiple violations that were noted, then the business is temporarily closed. And we'll continue to, as we indicated, part of the safety plan is not just to shut businesses down or stop business from operating, but how to operate in a safe way. And I think the question was relevant to the same treatment of another location. That particular location was prior to the safety plan. And one of the reasons we developed the safety plan is to provide that equity to, if any business across the city or essentially a location that serves alcohol is treated the same way. And so we're addressing this particular location to answer your question directly. They are temporarily closed and we'll continue to address any issues, but also to try and work with the business like we would do any other.
We had a.
Thank you. I'd like to hear back.
Mary Kay moved to it.
Well, in that one brief moment, in that same vein, with the information provided, to me, it was noteworthy that it was shut down for code compliance violations that apparently have nothing to do with it serving alcohol. And so when the ALE does its investigation and whatnot, if you could continue to keep us updated, because I imagine other organizations and businesses, if you have code violations, and the city can shut you down. So it's important to kind of understand why it was shut down. Moreover, if there's not a link between the code violation and any conduct that is linked to any crime, obviously we want to find where the actual link is to the crime and interrupt that, as opposed to just going into a business and finding a bunch of code violations, which we should be doing anyway.
Gotcha. I'll probably later on this week to allow, ALE is conducting their follow-up, but I'll collectively pull something together that will encompass all the questions.
Terrific, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
There's a motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Get out of here.